Okay, good afternoon. 안녕하세요. 안녕 안 하세요? Thank you for joining us today. I'm Gi-Wook Shin, Director of Shorenstein Asia Pacific Research Center, also the Korea program here at Stanford. It's my real pleasure to welcome all of you to the Korean Cuisine Gone Global conference this afternoon. So last month, I attended the annual meetings of the Association for Asian Studies in Seattle. I was pleasantly surprised that there was a Lotte Hotel that opened a few years ago, and we enjoy having kimchi fried chicken sliders and Korean seasonal pancake, which means 해물파전, with a soju cocktail in the lounge. So when I arrived in Seattle in 1983 for graduate study, it was not even thinkable that this would happen 40 years later. It has indeed been quite amazing to see South Korea grow into a prolific cultural hub and exporter. Our community in APAC was no exception to the growing audience interested in Korean culture. Recognizing this trend, some of you may know or even attended. 2 years ago, in celebrating the Korea program's 20th anniversary, we held a conference highlighting the global popularity of K-pop, featuring speakers like Suho from K-pop group EXO, and the Isuman, the founder of SM Entertainment. Okay, last year, as we are celebrating 40th anniversary of the center, we invited actor Lee Byung-hun and writer Park Ji-eun for a series of panels focusing on Korean drama and its impact on Hallyu or the Korean wave. So just like today, both conferences met with enthusiastic response from the Stanford community and beyond. So the popularity of K-pop and K-drama have facilitated the growing interest in broader aspects of Korean culture. So today's event, focusing on Korean cuisine, is the third installment of our series highlighting a crucial aspect of Korean culture or K-culture. The conference today is a product of the continued interest in many parts of Korean culture, combined with our motivations to emphasize the global attention to Korea's growing cultural power. Okay, knowing that the popularity and power of Korean culture is expanding every year and every corner, we hope to continue our series of Korean culture in the future as well. So if you have any suggestion for topic next year, please let us know. It can be K-beauty or K-sports or something else. But for today, we are very fortunate to have many friends and supporters who make a conference like this one into a reality. So we are very grateful to have actor, chef, Soo-young, and I think his family will join us later. And chef Judy Joo here today to speak about their unique perspectives working with Korean cuisine. I'd like to thank our panelists who will share their expertise on the phenomenon behind the popularity of Korean food. So the panel will follow right after my remark. I also like to thank Korea Foundation, Mr. Yoon from LA, other donors for their continued support for the Korea program. So as I was preparing my remark, I thought we should thank Korean ancestors who first created wonderful food, right, for Korean people 1,000 years ago. And finally, I'd like to thank our team here at the center, especially Professor Joo, Daphne Joo, who will be moderating the first panel, and Heather An from Korea program, for their help in coordinating and promoting today's conference. So we look forward to having rich discussions about Korean cuisine and culture today. So before we begin our program, let me show 2 reels that Yoo Lee, my former student, also a member of our team, has made for the conference based on the recipes of both chefs. That was really her idea. I had no idea in the beginning, but then it looked great. So thank you once again. I hope you will all enjoy a great conference. 감사합니다.
Awesome, great. Great, that was awesome. We have a saying in Korean, 금강산도 식후경, 금강산도 식후경. So if our chefs are 금강산, then first we have to have some nutritional meal with our scholars. So we're going to start with the scholar panel, but so beg your patience and really looking forward to our conversation today. My name is Daphne Tsour. I am an associate professor of Korean literature and culture in the Department of East Asian Languages and Cultures here at Stanford University. And I want to shout out to all of my students. I have so many students here today. I'm so excited. Yay! So I am deeply honored to kick off Korean Cuisine Gone Global with this first panel on new directions in food studies. As you heard from Professor Shin moments ago, since 2018, we here at Stanford have kept our finger on the pulse of Korean popular culture through a series of what I think are pretty awesome blockbuster events. And so when Professor Shin and I met to discuss what we're going to do next, the idea to host a conference on food was pretty much a no-brainer. Like so many things coming out of Korea, the food is hot. Korean ingredients and signature dishes, drinks and desserts. Korean food is hip and sophisticated, but also very comforting and unpretentious. I very much look forward to the next panel in which our celebrity chefs, both of whom are trailblazers in their own right, will share their personal journeys and their reflections on this moment in Korean cuisine. But first, as I said, 식후경, I've invited 3 scholars who will share their thoughts on how Korean food connects to broader questions of personal and national identity, family and community, the language of the home and the language of the heart. These speakers will challenge us to think about what Rebecca Kinney has called in her scholarship foodways. Professor Kinney refers to foodways as those which, quote, highlight the interconnected relationships to food that are created through dislocation, isolation, adaptation, and reunion. I add to this 2 more ways of thinking about foodways. One that evokes a path, 통로 in Korean, how food moves across time and space, over land and sea, and now more than ever, over social media, thus complicating questions of origin and authenticity. A second provocation is to think of ways in the sense of a ritual, a way of doing things. So these and other ways are both local and global, and they're constantly changing. Foodways, as we will hear about today from our speakers, also help challenge something that Professor Koo has done in his work, the idea of authenticity. And I encourage you all to consider, also as Professor Ri has asked us to do in her published work, the multiple ways that cooking culture can be a text that we can read. Let us listen now to how each of our speakers thinks about foodways as movement of food across time and space and across different communities, and the process of change that moving food undergoes as it shifts, as old and new rituals are created, and as authenticity, tradition are redefined and co-created. Each of our speakers will talk for about 20 minutes, and I will follow up with some questions for discussion, and then we'll open the floor to the audience. Our first speaker is Robert Koo, Associate Professor of Asian and Asian American Studies, Binghamton University. Before coming to Binghamton, Professor Koo directed the Asian American Studies program at Hunter College and chaired the Ethnic Studies program at Cal Poly Sloan. He recently relocated to Los Angeles, where he serves as the managing editor of the AAPI Multimedia Textbook Project at UCLA. He is the series editor of Food in Asia and the Pacific series with Hawaii University Press, and he has authored multiple edited volumes on popular culture and food, including 2 monographs, Dubious Gastronomy, The Cultural Politics of Eating Asian in the USA, and the soon-to-be-published Diasporic Korean Food in the Age of K-pop, also with Hawaii University Press. So please help me welcome Professor Koo.
Thank you. I guess this is the, thank you everyone. There we go. So I would like to begin by thanking Daphna for putting this wonderful program together. Thank you also to Director Gi-Wook Shin, Program Manager Heather An, and everyone in the Korea program here at Stanford for being such wonderful hosts. It's an honor to be here to share some of my work with you, and even a bigger honor to share the stage with Soo-young and Rebecca, both of whose work I'm huge fans of. So with short time that we have, let's get started. Oops.
Yeah. 역시 이사한 날은 짜장면에 탕수육이지.
Okay, I'm going to stop there because of time. Today's presentation is a tiny bite of a longer book project that I'm currently trying to finish, tentatively titled Hot, 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 Korean Food in the Age of K-pop. The book project brings together the 3 areas of research I've been most deeply involved with for the past 2 decades: food studies, Korean American and diasporic studies, and popular culture studies. The 3 hots of the title refer to the multiple meaning of the word that I believe perfectly embodies Korean food today from a transnational and diasporic perspective. Hot meaning spicy, tangy, piquant. Hot meaning sizzling, boiling, scalding. Hot meaning popular, trendy, cool. To these, I could easily add a 4th meaning hot, sexy, titillating, seductive. Try as I might, other than Korean, I can't think of any other dish, national cuisine that embodies at its core all 3 of these meanings of the word hot simultaneously. I believe this is perfectly illustrated by the jjajangmyeon scene we just saw a very glimpse of from the 2012 K-drama Let's Eat, starring Yoon Do-jun of the K-pop idol group Highlight, formerly known as Beast, whose Fiction is one of the greatest K-pop songs or otherwise ever recorded. Look at those badasses. All right, I'm going to move on. Watch it on your own. I don't have time. In a nutshell, my book is about the changes that Korean food has undergone during what I call the age of K-pop, told from the perspective of a Korean American, me, nearly 60 years old, who was born in Korea, then moved to the US at the age of 8. The book is very much autobiographical, where I take incidents and episodes, both real and fake, from my life and interweave them with a bit of history, critical analysis, and playful speculation about where Korean food has been, where it is now, and where it is going. To steal a whimsical disclaimer from the Netflix series Inventing Anna, this book would be completely true, except for all the parts that are totally made up. Of course, it goes without saying that Korean food, both on the peninsula and beyond, has changed dramatically over the course of my life and in varying and often unexpected ways, depending on the diasporic location. Consider what might today very well may be the face of Korean food. Well, not this, but this. Deep-fried corn dogs covered in diced potatoes, coated in sugar, and drizzled with mayo, ketchup, and mustard. In trying to make sense of the gastronomic changes that have taken place during my lifetime, I hope to also make sense of the changes to the very concept of what it means to be Korean, especially in the United States and the diaspora now in the 21st century. Part 1, Mother said she didn't like jjajangmyeon. If I was asked to list what I think are some of the greatest K-pop debut songs of all time, and by greatest I mean groundbreaking songs that kick-started phenomenal careers while simultaneously altering the future of music, I might include SES, I'm Your Girl, TVXQ, Hug, Big Bang, We Belong Together, Girls' Generation, Into the New World, Shiny's Back, Replay, IU's my favorite. I'm going to a concert in LA next in August. I can't wait. A Lost Child, 21's, Fire, EXO's, Mama, BTS's No More Dream. Can you believe they're already 10 years old? Red Velvet, my personal favorite. Sergey's my bias. Happiness, Twice, like Ua, 17's Adore You, Blackpink's Whistle, Stray Kids' District 9, I just went to the concert in LA last month. 11, New Jeans, Attention, Rises, Get a Guitar, great song. And for those of you who know, Illit's Magnetic, which is a great song, right? Just a few weeks ago. But if I had to choose one single song that qualifies as the greatest debut song in the history of K-pop, it has to be G.O.D's To Mother. First released in 1999. Not only the song itself, but also the music video, which features a very young Jang-hyuk, one of my favorite actors in the leading role. Coincidentally, Jang-hyuk is also one of my favorites, was in one of my all-time favorite K-drama, the amazing 2007 Thank You, whose storyline revolves around a struggle of a single mother, played by Gong Hyo-jin, and her HIV-positive daughter, played by the remarkable Seo Shin-ae, who was 9 at the time. Several people were involved in writing and producing the song, including Park Jin-young, a.k.a. J.Y. Park, a.k.a. this Asian soul, a.k.a. JYP, who was instrumental in forming G.O.D., a.k.a. Groove Overdose, at the onset under the EMB label. Sometime later, G.O.D., who went to rule K-pop during the early 2000s, would retroactively list Tupac Shakur as one of the song's composers, since it was obvious that To Mother stole from Tupac's Life Goes On. Another quick side note, it is perhaps not a coincidence that another first-gen idol group, Baby Vox, also with SCS and Pinkle, representing the 3 most important first-gen girl groups, was also accused of not only illegally sampling Tupac's music for their song Ecstasy, but also using his likeness in the music video. Unlike the men of G.O.D., whose careers thrived despite the plagiarism controversy, these women suffered the opposite fate by disbanding due to a lot of hate, including some fans calling them Miari VOX, in reference to the infamous red light district in Korea, one of the largest ever. This is despite the fact that while To Mother did in fact illegally sample Tupac, Ecstasy reportedly acquired all necessary legal permission to sample and use the likeness of Tupac in the song and the music video. I'm too quick in my clicking here. The lyrics to G.O.D's To Mother chronicles the economic hardship of a single mother raising her teenage son in the face of poverty. At a pivotal point during the song's narrative, the son complains to his mother that he is sick of eating ramen all the time, which prompts her to take money out of her emergency fund to buy him a bowl of jjajangmyeon. While happily eating, the son pauses briefly to ask his mother why she isn't eating. Her answer will go on to become what I believe is the most important line in K-pop history. Mother said she didn't like jjajangmyeon. Part 2, the best bowl of jjajangmyeon of my life. Try as I might, I can't think of another dish that speaks to my soul as much as jjajangmyeon does. I even love japaghetti. It's not that I think this is the most delicious dish in the world, far from it. But as we all know, the food that we yearn for and crave doesn't necessarily always hinge on how they objectively taste, but rather on the subjective and deeply personal meanings that they convey. First of all, what exactly is jjajangmyeon? 7 billion bowls a day is sold in Korea. For a quick answer, how about we consult the old standby, Wikipedia. According to Wikipedia, jjajangmyeon is a Korean Chinese noodle dish topped with a thick sauce made of chunjang, diced pork, and vegetables. It originated in Incheon, Korea, where Chinese migrant workers brought jjajangmyeon from Shandong in the late 19th century. You know what? That's a pretty good definition of as good as any. But let's break down this definition to some digestible bite-sized pieces. First, it is Korean Chinese dish, or Chinese Korean or Chinese Korean, Korean Chinese. Yes, that's certainly true, the same way that chop suey and General Tso chicken are Chinese American dishes. And Manchurian and lollipop chicken are Indian Chinese dishes. What they all signify and point to is not only the dizzyingly complicated gastronomic consequence of the Chinese diaspora, but the spectacular diversity of Chinese cuisine on a global scale, which is not paralleled, I don't think, by any cuisine in the world. Second, it is a noodle dish. Yes, but it's important to point out that the noodles are made of wheat flour, not, say, rice, buckwheat, sweet potato, acorn, or any other starch found in an array of Korean noodle dishes. In this regard, jjajangmyeon technically belongs to the category of bunchik, not the contemporary use of the term to mean inexpensive snack food such as tteokbokki, ramen, sundae, kimbap, kalguksu, or tigim, but the original, literal meaning of the word to mean food made from wheat flour. If we had to identify a single greatest contribution to the transformation of Korean food after the Korean War, I would say it was the pro-bunchik mandate that lasted over a decade. From 1963 to 1976, which essentially government dictated when and how much rice an ordinary Korean citizen was allowed to consume. Third, what is jjajangmyeon? The noodles are topped with stuff, most notably chunjang, pork, and vegetables, usually onions and cabbage, but also at times zucchini and potatoes. The key ingredient of jjajangmyeon, of course, is chunjang, also called tianmian in Chinese, made of fermented wheat and soybean mixed with dark caramel, but the wheat, it's 19 to 1. 19 part wheat to 1 part soybeans. Fourth, it originated in the city of Incheon. This is where I literally entered the picture, since I was born in Incheon, which is my birthplace, where I lived until I was 8 years old before my family emigrated to Hawaii. Finally, it was Chinese workers, the Hwagyo, hailing from Shandong in the 19th century, who brought over the progenitor of the Korean jjajangmyeon, called jjajangmyeon, also commonly referred to as Beijing fried sauce noodles, which is one of the 10 great noodles of China as determined by the Ministry of Commerce in China hotel situation. This also includes Shaanxi knife-cut noodles, that's the Chinese version, jjajangmyeon. Also includes the 10 great noodles of China, Shaanxi knife-cut noodles, Langzhou hand-pulled noodles, and Sichuan dandanmen. Jjajang, which means fried, which is an essential step in making the dish, since chunjang is literally fried, right, during the cooking process. My memory of ever eating at a restaurant for the first time in my life was around the age of 5 or 6 in Incheon at a Chinese Korean restaurant, sometime in the late 1960s, when Korea was among the poorest places in the face of the earth, before it somehow today is one of the top 10 economies. Since I'm turning 60 this year, that was over 55 years ago, if my math is correct. Although I only have a vague memory of my childhood in Korea, for some reason, I'm certain that it was my samchon, my mama's youngest brother, dressed in high school uniform with a shaved head, who treated me to my first bowl of jjajangmyeon in Incheon. If my memory serves me right, that was the most delicious thing I ever ate in my entire life at the age of 6. Ever since that moment, I have been on a lifelong quest to find a boba jjajangmyeon that is equally delicious. So far, 55 years later, I have not yet found it. The Chinese Korean diaspora. Until I left for college, dinner at home meant Korean food. In addition to working as a hotel maid in Waikiki during the day and as a cook and dishwasher at night, my mother had to also look after her 3 children and my father, who worked in the red-eye shift at a local strip club as a bartender, a vocation he picked up while working at an American military back in Korea. This meant that my overworked mother, prepared food that was principally meant to fill the family's stomachs, not to titillate their taste buds. It also had to be cheap, fast, and simple. If the food turned out to be tasty, that was a bonus. My mom was a terrible cook. One such item that fulfilled these conditions, filling, cheap, simple, fast, and tasty for me, was Sapporo Ichiban Ramen, which at the time was the best-selling brand, I think, in the world. Today, Shin Ramen. Right? Among everything my mother cooked, this was my favorite. Roy Choi, the Korean American who launched 1,000 taco trucks, demonstrates making Sapporo Ichiban Ramen. But I'm going to skip it because I don't have time. Watch it yourselves, all right? It was not until years later in life that I realized the deeper meaning of instant ramen, which according to the Fuji Institute survey conducted in the year 2000, was voted by the people of Japan as the greatest invention of the 20th century. It easily beat out karaoke machines, which came in second, and the Sony Walkman, which came in third. And I had no idea at the time the instant ramen that my mother cooked for me was not Korean, but it was Japanese. And if you go back far enough, Chinese. Similarly, it was not until later in life that I figured out jjajangmyeon's connection to the Chinese diaspora. One consequence of Korea's rapid rise up the economic ladder over the past decades has been the increased internalization of Korea, especially of foreign tourism, particularly from China. In 2016, nearly half of the 14 million foreigners to Korea were Chinese. Koreans have met the dramatic increase in the number of tourists from China, which is Korea's biggest trading partner, with a healthy dose of ambivalence. On the one hand, they all welcome the money that China brings. On the other hand, they resent the Chinese presence. And they blame everything about Korea to China, even the bad air. They say China's fault. Of course, Korea is not the first country in the world to scapegoat the Chinese for all kinds of problems. The United States, as you know, has had a long history of blaming Chinese for everything. In fact, one might say that scapegoating the Chinese is as American as baseball, Chevrolet, and General Tso's chicken. And this is not new to Korea either. The Park Chung-hee regime established economic policies to specifically curb Chinese businesses' activities and limit land ownership. What this did was compel the majority of the Chinese Koreans to move out of Korea, from Incheon to places like Taiwan, Canada, United States, to form what the New York Times, what is called the Chinese diaspora, so that the Incheon Chinatown in Korea is a Chinatown without Chinese people. After settling elsewhere around the world, the displaced Korean Chinese established livelihoods that often involved one of the few occupations that was made available to them, running Chinese restaurants for the benefit of largely the Korean diasporic communities. For instance, like the one in Hawaii, for whom a bowl of jjajangmyeon meant maintaining a sense of Koreanness via a power of gastronomic nostalgia. Unlike the Jang-hyuk character in G.O.D's Mother's music video, I never tired of instant ramen. Although like him, what brought me the greatest joy was when my father would take me to jjajangmyeon at the Eastern, it's still there, Paradise Restaurant in Honolulu. If you go to Hawaii, go there. All right? If any bowl of jjajangmyeon came close, as delicious as the one I had with my samcheon, this was it. But more than the food, what I remember the most about this restaurant were the women who worked there. To the customers who were Koreans, like me and my father, the waitresses just spoke in Korean. To the other guests who were not Korean, they spoke English or Pidgin Hawaiian. But among themselves, they spoke in Chinese. And I never knew until much later on why it was so. Okay, conclusion. If anyone should love jjajangmyeon, it's my mother, who was born in Incheon, just a stone's throw away from Chinatown. And she lived there all her life until she moved with her family to Hawaii in the early 70s. This is where she met my father, a refugee from the north, whose family migrated south during the war in stereotypical fashion, carrying bundles on their heads and desperately clinging to crowded railroad cars. What this meant was I was confronted with a binary dilemma from early in my life. Am I team jjajangmyeon or am I team naengmyeon? Since naengmyeon is the famous dish from north, right? My father's favorite. The answer for me always was jjajangmyeon, because jjajangmyeon's messy, but naengmyeon made me choke because I couldn't bite would go down gag, right? As long as I could remember, my mother hated jjajangmyeon. In fact, it is safe to say she rather despised it, right? So much so that the Chinese Korean restaurant was the last place she wanted to go, even if given the choice. If she ended up there, mostly to acquiesce my father, she never ordered jjajangmyeon. Neither did she opt for the other great binary, are you jjajangmyeon or are you jampong? I'm jjajangmyeon. For my mother and those who do both, you're cheating. That's not allowed. For mother, it was neither. And the reason was always the same. She hated punchik, or she hated flour-based food, which reminded her of her childhood and poverty. In this regard, unlike the young Jang-hyuk in the Two Mother music video, jjajangmyeon where jjajangmyeon represented poverty and not luxury, my mother actually, well, in that video, the mother was lying, right, to the son. She didn't like it because she couldn't afford to buy another bowl. But in my mom's case, it was actually true. I'll end here, and thank you.
All right. Thank you so much. I really look forward to a discussion after. Okay, next up is Professor Juyeon Ri, Associate Professor of Asian Studies and Comparative Literature at Penn State University. Professor Ri specializes in modern Korean literature and culture with a particular emphasis on transnational literary exchanges and interactions. Her first book, The Novel in Transition, Gender and Literature in Early Colonial Korea, investigates the transnational feature of modern Korean novels at the intersection of nation, gender, and colonialism. Her new book looks at cultural imaginations of crime and deviance through Korean detective fiction. In 2023, she published a co-edited volume through the journal Verge Studies in Global Asias, and she co-wrote an introduction titled Cooking Cultures, Global Asias on the Move and in the Making. Please join me welcoming Professor D.
Wow. I always
thinking how nice it would be to just stay there, listen to Professor Koo's lecture. So interesting, and thank you so much for a rich presentation. And I was also thinking, Professor Koo told us that he has 100 slides. 101. And now I know why. And I only have 10. And so I have enormous pressure, but let's see what I can do. And I think I can resonate with Professor Koo's experience sharing his mother's attitude toward 밀가루, because my father hated barley, because 보리 was also a symbol of poverty. So we all kind of shared that experience and memory with the family. And I think it's a good kind of transition to talk about Japan now, because I am working on Korean Japanese in Japan and their food. So let me begin. And this is how okay. This is the clicker? The top. Oh, okay, great. So let me show you a map and a ship. And this, I'm going to talk a little bit about a lady whose name is Kim Yang-neung. She was about 15 years old when she crossed the ocean from Jeju Island to Osaka. And I'm talking about the 1920s. And that is the ship called Kimiga Yomaru, which was used to transport people from Osaka to Jeju Island. And as she crossed the ocean and she settled in Osaka and met her husband, who was Hong Ye-ah. And then he was also from Jeju. And he went to Manchuria first, and where he was a majok, he was a bandit. Not all Koreans in Manchuria were independence fighter. So he was a bandit, and then he went to Osaka, met the Yang-neung, and then married and settled in Osaka. And Yang-neung was a really, this is Osaka area, and the Ikaino district in particular, which doesn't exist now, but this has been the place where the largest group of Koreans live in Japan. So anyway, Yang-neung is really well known for her rice cakes. And she was called the rice cake grandma. And she handed down her recipes and business to her daughter-in-law, Kang Jae-sun. You can see her selling rice cake right there in the Ikaino district. And she is also from Jeju Island. As many of you know, she escaped from Jeju April 3rd massacre. And so she settled there, and she ran the rice cake business with her grandmother. And that's the family photo. And the picture on the right is a picture I took last summer. That is a group, the company produces more than rice cake. They produce food in Japan. And this is run by grandson, right, at the moment. And I am talking about today his memoir and called Way of Painting and Way of Food. That is my focus. That is the focus of my talk today. So what I want to talk about is a border crossing and how border crossing is really sticky matter. So Hong's border crossing experience has been an intricate, as his grandmothers and grandfathers, and moving across Japan, both Koreas, but also moving along and around the rules, restrictions, and borders marking the inter-imperial temporalities and geographies of Cold War East era. So tracing this seemingly impossible double pursuit of art and food, both simultaneously and successively in the last 5 decades, Hong's account of his life and that of his family lays bare the historical realities that not only have limited their mobility, but also engendered emotional tension,
ideological conflicts, and psychological and geographic divisions among Koreans living in Japan. So why am I focusing on this memoir? And I think this memoir has a compelling aspect of the kind of unusual mix of high art with the seemingly mechanical nature of food making. Together, they remap the boundary of the genre itself as a memoir, which I don't have time to talk about today, but I would love to talk more about later. And making it highly elusive, elastic. And I think this elusiveness, elasticity is generative in few ways. First, it provides a constructive way to engage with the intricacy and everydayness of the interregional and intergenerational imagination of border crossing, not easily grasped by using established political theories or examining diplomatic policies alone. And I think his text is also interesting because it makes a critical intervention into hegemonic aestheticism by addressing the material and intellectual dissonance between established discourse and unrecognized everyday practice by mixing his account of high artistry, painting he does, with that of his enmeshment in the low culture, quote-unquote low culture of food industries. And I think the memoir uses food as a medium to delineate multiple layers of intimacy between the material and intellectual realms of diasporic life. His portrayals of the people appearing in his memoir, as well as the relations he creates between the readers and the text, are not always positive or optimistic, but rather frequently convey feelings of betrayal, misunderstanding, and unpredictability of everyday life, of diasporic life itself. I use this term minor kitchen, not just to refer to Zainichi Korean, the Korean Japanese often called Zainichi, so I'm using Zainichi here. I'm not just referring to their food practice, but I do not mean to limit this practice to those performed by women or highlight only the marginality of the migrant kitchen. But I would like to emphasize the minor kitchen in both the materials and symbolic way as a repository of the minoritarian power to challenge both structural and discursive discrimination against Chinese Koreans, not only just in Korea, in Japan, discrimination against Koreans in both Koreas, North and South Korea. And So-Hong opens his memoir with his family's experience of the Jeju April 3rd massacre. That's how he starts his memoir. And he was positioning Jeju as the origin of the taste of the Tokuyama group, the food companies. Hong's grandmother, I just introduced to you in the beginning, and his mother, they're also from Jeju. They use their recipes handed down from their great aunt, who was a Buddhist nun in Jeju Island. So that was the origin of their rice cake recipes. And the great aunt's kitchen, located in a small Buddhist temple, was famous throughout Jeju. And throughout the rice cake produced there, people recognized her skill as well as her good work for the community. And just like many other Jeju Islanders, this great aunt had a hard time during the April 3rd massacre. And such as Hong's parents and had a lot of relatives sacrificed by the incident. Anyway, this is a really traumatic experience for many islanders. And Hong's father passed away without revealing this experience at all. And Hong found out only through other people's accounts. Hong's mother could only reveal this recently, and this book was published in 2019. So she was keeping this experience all along to herself. She wasn't ready to share until recently. And so you may wonder then, okay, so Koreans living in Japan, they escaped, a lot of them escaped from the Jeju massacre, and a lot of them were starving too. And how did this Hong family maintain their rice cake business? Because it takes a lot of rice to make rice cake, those of you who experienced making rice cake. There are two reasons. One is ancestor ritual. Ancestor ritual still is really, really important for Chinese communities. So in this ancestor ritual, rice is necessary. So in a way, Hong family cater towards this community need. And at the same time, Jeju is really known for really rich shamanistic tradition. And if you go to Osaka, you will see also very deeply rooted shamanistic practice there too. Again, with the shamanistic rituals, so you need rice cakes. It's necessary. So that's how she maintained the business, or how they been maintaining the business and advance later on. But let's go back to to Hong's experience. What makes his food route, I would say, unusual is his desire to embrace both Koreas and Japan. And this has caused strain and difficulty for him due to the ideological divisions within the Chinese Korean community and their precarity in relation to both states. Hong focuses on consumption trends, business models, and opportunities, real and imagined borders, and everyday interactions with other Koreans without resorting to nostalgia for or romanticization of his ancestral home. At the same time, he does not deny the pleasure of seeing his Korean food products brought and sold by people in both countries, aligning this with the pleasure he experiences when people come to see his paintings at the exhibition. And I think you are familiar with the Lotte Tower when you go to Gangnam. This was built by a Korean Japanese entrepreneur. And I grew up, I think still children grew up eating Lotte 과자. So this is one of the very successful cases of Korean Japanese entrepreneurs in food business. And there are some minor players such as Morambong food companies and Hong's companies. They've been keeping their business, not only just selling their food in Japan, they are reaching out to South Korea and North Korea. And Hong at one point tried to establish a naengmyeon manufacturing business in North Korea. It didn't go out because of the many political issues, but that's what makes him really interesting. Let's just talk a little bit about his painting. What does it have to do with his art? It is not a secret that Hong was the major force behind the recently founded Osaka Korea Town History Museum. As you can see in the picture, it's located in the heart of Korean town. It was established by elected community members to promote awareness of the history of Koreans in Japan. The memorial stone by the museums, I don't know, oh, it's a kind of a hidden behind the line of, but there's a memorial stone there. It says, Gyose no Hi, which means a memorial stone of symbiotic way of life, emphasizing the importance of coexistence between Koreans and Japanese. So this museum houses various archives, books, photographs, films, videos, recordings, maps, and so on. Their exhibit regularly. And if you happen to visit Osaka, I strongly recommend that you visit there. And the symbiosis represents Hong's philosophy of art as well. The theme of one of his series of painting was a prayer in the past, one on the right, one on the left. And it was meant to portray Chinese Koreans' wish to return to a united homeland. His real-life experience in South Korea and Japan made him revise this theme. And he realized that the dream of returning to a homeland was not only unrealistic, but is also one far removed from the everyday struggle of Koreans living in Japan. And he changed the theme into to live. And he also established this place where people can come and experience cooking Korean food together, enjoy eating Korean food together, and learn about Korean history. I'm not talking about the Korean people visiting. I'm talking about Japanese people and Japanese children in particular. They will come here and interact with the Koreans living in Japan and learning about their history. So the Hong's family's contribution to community building that embraces all people in Osaka, regardless of ethnicity, can also be seen in this shop or should I say exhibition place. And the studio also exhibits various kinds of art that's becoming a contact zone for experiencing Korean and Japanese art as well. So in this way, the studio can be seen as an ethnographic and artistic encounter with the entanglement of Chinese Korean history, especially interwoven with the visual and sensorial aesthetics. My conclusion. Oh, well, yeah, it's a good time to come back to this. Hong turns the embodied experience of the everyday labor involved in food production, juxtaposing the process of art making with the process of rice cake making in the last part of his memoir. The detailed description of the rice cake making evokes the sensorial aspects of the process of transforming rice into powder and then into cakes. The description of steaming the rice cakes and the way his parents and workers engage in this labor seems to intend to show how the story of the Tokuyama Group, the food company, is more than the story of handling materials and machinery, but is rather one that traces the entangled movement of bodies, cultural knowledge, and lifeways across the sticky border of history. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Ji-Yeon. Okay, I'll invite our last speaker, Professor Rebecca Jo Kinney. Professor Kinney is an interdisciplinary teacher and scholar of American Studies and Ethnic Studies, and the director and graduate coordinator of American Cultural Studies at Bowling Green State University, Ohio. Professor Kinney's award-winning first book is titled Beautiful Wasteland: The Rise of Detroit as America's Post-Industrial Frontier. Her second book, Mapping Asiatown Cleveland, Race and Redevelopment in the Rust Belt, is anticipated from Temple University Press in 2025. She's writing her third book now, tentatively titled Making Home in Korea: The Transnational Lives of Adult Korean Adoptees. Professor Kinney published an article on transnational adoption and food in Verge, the journal edited by Professor Ji-Yeon Lee, with an article titled, quote, Flavors of East LA and the Heart of Seoul, Transnational Korean Adoptee Foodways. Please help me welcome Professor Kinney.
Good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me okay in the back? Okay, great. So thank you to the conference organizers and to the Center for inviting us here today. Thank you to my fellow panelists for such wonderful papers, and thank you to all of you for spending this beautiful, I guess it's always beautiful in Palo Alto, but this beautiful afternoon here with us. And I can't wait to hear from our chefs in in the second half. So, oh, I should figure this out, the green. Okay, so the title of the paper I'm presenting you with today is called Transnational Tastemakers in the Seoul Food Scene, Korean Adoptees in the Language of Food. And it comes from a bit of a work in progress, the third book that Daphne alluded to, so I really welcome conversation with you all this afternoon. A classic French quiche and financier for takeout in a first floor storefront in Yeonnam, a bottle of wine and light appetizers shared among friends on a second floor street view space in Hwaegi, a weekend pop-up brunch with a DJ spinning 80s and 90s hip-hop and R&B in a whiskey bar in Unjiro. These are but 3 snapshots of Seoul's food scene in the early 2020s. And, as I will present here, are a way into the provocation of this conference, Korean food gone global. These 3 very different experiences of dining and drinks in a city filled with food and drink were created by 3 people who were born in Korea, transnationally adopted to the US and France respectively, and in their 20s returned migrated to Korea, where each of them have lived for over a decade. In deciding to focus my remarks today on the experiences of these 3 specific tastemakers in the Seoul dining scene, I am also highlighting the experiences of a particular subset of the Korean diaspora, 3 of the 200,000 plus people who were transnationally adopted from Korea during 70 plus years of ongoing Korean adoption. And as you will see from the stories I share today, these 3 tastemakers are in collaboration with other members of the Korean diaspora, Koreans, and other foreigners that are living in Seoul, which begs the question that I don't have a singular answer for. What makes Korean food Korean food? Obviously, the foodways of Korea, the rich and long history of royal cuisine, fermentation, temple food, and also budae-jjigae. Is Korean food that is carried and adapted and changed Korean food? I think of this often when remembering Ji Eun-yu's recounting of a Korean military bride who, when she arrived to America, was so hungry for the taste of home that she made gochujang from stale bread, here's a recipe for you, from stale bread, soy sauce, and crushed red pepper. This was a prized commodity to give and receive, as only a few had mastered how to make this creation. A new arrival turned her nose and regifted this culinary mashup, being passed off as a staple flavor. However, a few weeks later, this no longer new arrival attempted to retrieve her cast-off, but the recipient would not return the imposter gochujang, as by then, as everyone knew, this was the closest approximation one could get to the flavors of Korea. This moment that I recount here seems improbable, as gochujang appears, yes, in every Asian market across the globe, and also featured in Shake Shack burgers, and atop a turkey burger at a local American hangout in a suburban Detroit strip mall. Yet, it's the leap between Ji Eun-yu's story of this imposter gochujang and a 2023 article that appeared in Better Homes and Garden entitled, quote, "What is gochujang and how to use it?" end quote, that seems improbable to me, a Korean adoptee growing up in the Midwest in the 1980s and 1990s. I could never, in my wildest imagination, think that Better Homes and Garden, a century-old institution of aspirational American homemaking, would run a story on Korean red pepper paste. My, how times have changed. What makes Korean food Korean food? Foodies, chefs, critics, and food scholars who love to debate authenticity, probably among people sitting up on the stage, often report fusion food with derision and proclaim to be experts in what is and is not real. So I wonder today if, as a way into this talk about 3 diasporic tastemakers, if you'll hold with me these questions, and maybe we'll just do a simple yes or no, okay? So is this Korean food? Cup ramen slurped at the counter of a pyeonrijam in the middle of the night? Korean food, yes or no? Yes, okay. Cup ramen slurped over a desk in Ohio while watching K-drama? Is this Korean food? An abalone taco nestled in a yuba shell? Is this Korean food? I see one hearty young foodie back there. Indeed, this is one of Chef Sung-an's signature opening bites at Mosu, Korea's only 3-star Michelin restaurant. Indeed, this abalone taco is a play on this Tijuana street tacos he ate as a teenager growing up in San Diego. Is this Korean food? Pat bingsu eaten at a tous les jours in Metro Detroit. Is this Korean food? Yeah, I think pat bingsu counts, right? It's in Jeonmi, so it has to be, right? And finally, my favorite pizza in the world. Is this Korean food? Smoked chicken and ham with a spicy barbecue tomato sauce, topped with macaroni and cheese. Served at a pizza place in Mangwon, found only in Seoul. Is this Korean food? Korean food gone global indeed. People sometimes ask what makes adopted returnees different from other diasporic Koreans who return to Korea. Aren't their experiences similar? There are overlaps common to people of the Korean diaspora. A return that feels familiar and also awkward, a sense of continuing placelessness in homeland and also in country of citizenship, varying fluency in language, culture, and family ties. But by virtue of context of migration, for the majority of people who were transnationally adopted, there are distinct differences. The three transnational tastemakers I'm introducing you to today, Pierre, James, and Mr. B, bring a particular relationship to food born of a unique diasporic experience. By highlighting a portion of their stories, I further developed the idea of transnational Korean adoptee foodways. And here, the break in the compound word foodways into foodways is an intentional gesture, wherein this space represents a break of culture, family, and connection to natal Korean foodways that in nearly all cases for transnational adoptees was sudden and immediate, and more often than not, experienced in isolation. Additionally, this break allows the space for new ways of experiencing Korean food culture to emerge. Pierre, James, and Mr. B's experiences come from a larger research study I conducted, adult Korean adoptees making home and building community in South Korea. From July 2021 to April 2022, I interviewed 42 people who had been transnationally adopted as infants and children, and subsequently return migrated as adults to live in Korea. While the research itself was not explicitly focused on food, many of the respondents spoke about their experiences and relationships with food, Korean and otherwise, as a part of home. And the three I'm focusing on today, because of their work, have a distinct connection to the food industry. Specifically, I suggest that their experiences building careers around food in the country of their birth illustrates the ways in which food can operate as community, language, and process for transnationally adopted people. Food as community. I met Pierre on an afternoon in early December at the wine bar he and his girlfriend co-own down the street from Kyung University. The second floor space in a curved street-faced building was bedecked in festive Christmas trim, the sunlight streaming in through the windows, bathing the room in warm light. Hours before service began, the bar was quiet enough to faintly hear traffic from the street. Pierre was born in Korea in the early 1980s, adopted to a small island town near Bordeaux, France, and at the time of our interview, he had been living in Korea for 13 years, during which time he had worked in a variety of industries: military, tourism, and now hospitality. As stated previously, while the interviews themselves at large were about home and community, we spent a fair amount of time speaking about his wine bar as reflective of the communities that he and his girlfriend are part of. Pierre shared that, quote, "The wine bar we built is representing what we are, me and my girlfriend," end quote. And their clientele reflects this as 1/3 Korean, 1/3 Russian-speaking, and 1/3 Western, including French, other Europeans, Americans, and Canadians. Importantly to this conversation, it might be helpful to know that Pierre's girlfriend identifies as Koryoin. Her grandparents migrated to Russia during Japanese colonization and were subsequently forced to migrate to Central Asia, where she grew up. She was raised in a community of diasporic Koreans speaking both Russian and a local language, and has lived for a number of years in Seoul. Both proprietors identify as diasporic Koreans and run an establishment that regularly hosts Korean speakers, Russian speakers, French speakers, and English speakers. On any given evening, the room is abuzz with the laughter, the clinking of glasses, and a mixture of these 4 linguistic patterns in every possible configuration and accent. This space, while some consider it a French wine bar, is obviously, from what you know, clearly more than this. It defies simple classification because of the sheer number of cultural influences that shape the menu, the atmosphere, and the culture of the bar itself. Pierre reflected on this when sharing the different ways he and his partner interact with their friends and customers who patronize the bar. He said, quote, "It's interesting because, for example, Russian clients, when they come, they always, it's a politeness that as an owner, as host, you should come and share. They will offer you drinks from their bottles, and you need to stay with them and talk to them and everything. You take the French. French do not share their bottles with you. And if you go to sit with them, they're really happy, but they're not going to share the bottles unless you're a really close friend. But most of the time, it doesn't happen. And Koreans, if you even come to see them, it's weird. So even friends, you don't sit with them. The French stay really long, they drink a lot, but they stay really long. Russians, they stay really long, but they drink more like Koreans than French. And they do things kind of quickly, more like the Korean style. And then Koreans, they either come really long and drink nothing at all, or they drink a lot, but they stay a really short time. There's no in between. And we were both laughing as he relayed all of this, and I should say here that my spouse is French, so it's kind of funny, these cultural stereotypes. And so he relayed all of this half in jest and half in all seriousness. These three cultural groups, all with such distinctive and rich drinking cultures, described here in a humorous shorthand, coexist in this one space, this one tiny bar in Seoul. And the proprietors move fluidly and fluently between all of these cultural groups, hosting, adapting, and creating a distinctly global and local Seoul community. The language of food. I met James in a cafe in the shadow of Yongsan-guchong, a short walk from where he lives in the larger Itaewon neighborhood. At the time of our meeting, James had recently transitioned out of a position as head of menu development for a Korean brewery and was running a few pop-up projects with a Kyopo friend and business partner. He was in the midst of some playful experimentation as he considered his next venture. James is in his mid-30s, was born in Korea, and adopted as an infant to the US. He grew up in a rural community on the West Coast and moved to the Bay Area for college and stayed there until moving to Korea in his mid-20s. He reflected, quote, "A big thing for me in the Bay Area was language. There I was doing poetry, I was teaching, I was facilitating," end quote. He recalls a huge shift in connection around language when he moved, stating, quote, "I came to Korea and I couldn't do any of those things really, except for teaching. And so food became this way that I sort of connected with people. It was the way that we could all sit in a room and not really have any shared language. But I could cook something for them, and they'd be like, wow, this is really crazy, and good, and fun. So we could all have an experience together," end quote. Throughout our conversation, James turned over again and again the idea of Korean food as deeply linked to community and what it means to be home in a place. James enjoys Korean food, is knowledgeable about and cooks Korean, and he shared, quote, "I think with food, you always have those, everyone I think has those core foundational experiences with food that generally happen when you're younger, that positive or negative shape your relationship with food and what you crave and what you feel like home, right? And for me, that will never be Korean food," end quote. Yet James's menus are deeply engaged with the local context and its Korean and global influences. He reflected, quote, "For example, what we're doing with our pop-ups right now, I think there's a way in which we can approach Korean food and think about it under the lens of people who are third culture or diasporic, and say something that hopefully adds to the scene, not just an understanding of what Korean food can be, but also what it even means for something to be Korean food," end quote. Near the end of our conversation about food, language, and home, I asked him, "And then in the language of food, James, what is home to you?" And he replied, quote, "I think personally it's less about the product and it's more just about the experience of gathering. I think professionally for me, it's cooking something that creates room for myself to be not just myself, but the adoptee diaspora to be understood differently in terms of their relationship with Korea. But the gatekeeping in terms of what is Korean and what isn't is really strong. I guess part of our hope and motivation for our pop-ups, which do have Korean elements in them, is like, hey, these are the things that we find enjoyable and that we nerd out about with Korean cuisine. And even though you may feel us as other or outside, I think what we're doing here is given that culture is always shifting and changing, what we're doing here is part of that change and shift, and I think an important one. Food for me, still James, it's always connected to, it's a lens for which I see society and community and relationships, end quote. Although James didn't come to Korea to pursue a career in the culinary world, he has built a solid reputation through his hard work and years of on-the-job training, working his way from cooking as a hobby, through experiences washing dishes, working as a prep sous chef, and then finally moving up through a growing brewery concept to head of menu development. And after over 10 years in Korea, he had just in the months before our meeting decided to settle permanently in Seoul. As he considers his next move, he holds food and the connections and community it enables as key to making a home for himself. Food as process. I met Mr. B on his day off in the test kitchen of the bakery that he works at in Yeonnam-dong. We drank coffee and snacked on the remnants of a recipe test for a Japanese-style Basque cheesecake he was developing. Mr. B, in his early 40s, adopted as a toddler to French Brittany, had been living in Seoul for almost 10 years. Before returning to Korea in his early 30s, he had a successful career in Paris making visual effects for the global film industry. But he came to Korea in order to study Korean and to, quote, process my emotions and the way I interact with people, end quote, particularly around his experiences with racism growing up as an Asian man in France. He has found a sense of peace in Seoul that he did not have, he has found a sense of peace in Seoul that he did not have in France, among both other adoptees and what some in this community sometimes refer to as Korean Koreans. When he first moved to Seoul, he lived for a while in the Korean guest stop, a first stop for many in the adoptee community. It was there he met an American Korean adoptee who he eventually started to date, and they married. In 2016, he and his then wife moved to Perpignan in the Catalan region and the very south of France to study pastry. Mr. B shared, quote, we plan to live several years in France, like 5 years, something like that, and work in some pastry shops. But my ex-wife didn't like it. It was a very rough time, end quote. They stayed only 2 years of the intended 5, first for training and then for internships in Perpignan, and then taking a second internship in Nantes in the Loire Valley. In fact, Mr. B's now ex-wife quit the second internship on the second day of their 6-month contract and returned early to Seoul. Mr. B completed this second internship and then returned to start working in pastry shops in Seoul and to commence the dissolution of the marriage. The training itself in classical French pastry was rigorous and challenging as expected. Long hours, lots of yelling, little pay. Mr. B shared that they, quote, had no money, we were interns, so no money, it wasn't enjoyable at all. Plus the racism, end quote. As Mr. B elaborated on their experiences, it became clear that it was the constant racism, both in the kitchen and on the streets, that wore the couple down. Mr. B referenced times when they were walking to and from work, quote, in the streets, there are some people just staring, And at home, even there, we open the window and they look inside and shout. Not many times, just a few times, but I think it was really hard for her. It surprised her. Me, I wasn't surprised. I already knew, end quote. Well, both Mr. B and his now ex-wife both grew up in primarily white families and white communities in France and in the US respectively. They were no strangers to racial microaggressions and active racism, but their experiences as pastry interns in the south of France was unparalleled and created a continued state of psychological distress. For Mr. B, however, the training and knowledge he gained formally as a pâtissier in France has been a strong foundation for his work in pastry shops in Seoul. And in all likelihood, his native fluency with French culinary culture is valued to his Korean employers as they seek to make not Korean French pastry, parenthetical here, the long love affair with tous les jours or Paris baguette, rather to make classic French pastry in Seoul. But as evidenced by the testing of the Japanese-style Basque cheesecake, what is French pastry in the heart of Seoul? And moreover, why is this demarcation important? What makes Korean food Korean food? Rather, what I seek to illustrate with these 3 brief snapshots is the dynamic, ever-changing, and indefinable relationship we have with food. By focusing on the foodways of 3 tastemakers in the early 2020s Seoul food scenes, Diasporic Koreans, born in Korea but raised in France and the US, whose work in Seoul contributes to the flavor and vibes of this global city, I aim to show how culture is born of ongoing dialogue between and among the local and the global. Although these three particular conversations traversed at least 4 distinct languages and cultures, there was not a word that could sufficiently capture the cultural complexities of food, foodways, and all that is wrapped up into the consumption, preparation, tradition, innovation, not to mention feeling, emotion, and symbolic heft that food serves. So much more than simply calories. Which is why ideas of authenticity and fusion are insufficient. Yet they often serve as the simplest ways that food adaptations and changing foodways are transmitted. While none of these observations are new, as anthropologists, food studies scholars, and critics have long discussed foodways and culture, by situating the experiences of a distinct subgroup, transnationally adopted Koreans, we can access different ways of understanding food and foodways that diverge and converge in Seoul, a persistently local and unquestionably global city. Thank you. Oops.
The presenters today have given us a sense of how Korean food is both a result of and the impetus for global circulation. Robert Koo reminds us of the ways that Korean food is a result of global circulation, as in the case of Chinese migrants from Shandong. At the same time, Korean food provides the impetus for global circulation. Koreans in Japan or Korean adoptees that go back to Korea and that themselves become foodways. So I think these points are all really important for our conference today, which is meant not only to celebrate Korean food and highlight its diversity and creativity, but also to articulate its defining characteristics and to point to ways that Korean cuisine, like all cuisines, is a combination of local and global, traditional and modern. And it was really, I was very excited when I was trying to think about guests that can come and really represent this diversity, really exciting cutting-edge scholarship on food. I thought these 3 scholars really bring in that diasporic perspective, which is so important, I think, for the discussion of Korean cuisine. So we have about 25 minutes, and I would like to allow our audience to ask our scholars questions. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pose a few questions for our guests. In the meantime, it takes a little bit of time to come up with a question, so think of something you want to ask our speakers. If you have a question that you would like to ask, I just ask that you please first identify yourself at the microphone, and also please be brief to allow for maximum time of discussion. So again, think of a question, identify yourself, be brief, and you can line up at the mic. So I'm going to start us off with a couple of questions for our speakers. So my first sort of general question is, what does the study of cuisine allow you to do as scholars? What stories does the study of food allow you to tell that you would not otherwise be able to? So that's my first question. And the second is, I imagine that there are a lot of students in the audience today that never really considered food as a viable topic of academic study. So would you share advice about how one might go about studying food, studying cuisine? What kinds of questions drove your work initially, some of which you presented today? What kinds of questions do you find unproductive for the kind of research that you do? Thank you.
So, one of us start?
Yeah. I just spoke. So.
Oh, okay. So I have a PhD in English literature. So I used to be an English professor, which I was miserable at. I was terrible at it. I was miserable doing it. And so when I, one point, had a new appointment, academic appointment, I had the unique opportunity to redefine my research. So I abandoned my book project on Asian American literature, and instead embarked on this book about Asian Americans and food, because that's something I enjoyed. I became an English major, did a PhD in English because I enjoyed reading, but the best way to hate reading is to become a professor of literature. But meanwhile, as I was miserable doing English literature, I was cooking a lot. I was watching all this like stuff on the Food Network, was just launched. Gourmet magazine I was reading it religiously. Then I started doing these monthly dinners that I would have in my studio apartment in New York City. 400 square foot apartment, right? I would have 20 people in there, and I would cook them a meal from that month's issue of Gourmet. So that was, and then I got immersed. And so when I had the opportunity to go to tell myself, it's okay to move on from literature. My wife was really upset because she thought you're gonna ruin your career. What is wrong with you, right? So I said, trust me, anyway. Anyway, so to make it fast, take the long story short, that's how I started in food studies. And it was the best decision ever in my life. It saved my life because it made my teaching more interesting for me and for my students. And there's so much to do. Like, if I wrote about Shakespeare, who cares? Right? If I wrote about Milton, who cares? If I wrote about Moby Dick, who cares what I had to say? But for some reason, because I was among the first to write about Asian Americans and food, suddenly people were interested. People liked talking about food. And so that's the beginning of how I started food studies. And then I got into K-pop. That's a whole separate category. And then I kind of combined the two. In terms of questions for grad students, I think if you love it, you should do it. That's what I think. Although to be a grad student means you got to be a professor. It's a terrible job, unless you work at Stanford. But the market out there is terrible. So my advice to any grad student is play your graduate career like you would the market. Look ahead 5-10 years to see where the buzz is. And that's where you should be studying, teaching, writing on. I'm telling them, I'm a very mediocre scholar, but I'm good at being first. So I'd rather be first than the best. And so I'm lucky to have been first to do, actually, I was the first to organize a K-pop conference at Binghamton University about 10 years ago, right? And so all these firsts, I kind of feel good about that. And so my suggestion to the grad students is be first. You don't have to be the best. Anyway. I'll move on.
I'm sure Stanford loves that topic.
Okay. Do you want to go? Sure. Yeah. I mean, I wasn't sure what I was getting into when I studied my food studies. It didn't really start as a study. It was more like starting out as a fun. And I always had interest in talking about food because of my family background and so on. But it really kicked off in Israel, where I taught. I taught there for 6 years. And Israel, as you know, there's a really strict rule on food. So even ramen was not available. And kimchi, we had to wait a long time until someone grew cabbages. And they harvest the cabbage, and then, they make the kimchi. So wait for a long time. And so this was a kind of situation there. But then I realized soon my students started cooking Korean food. And I realized they were getting ingredients from outside. So I got really curious about it. There was one kind of a really interesting phenomenon that really motivated me to look into what is, this whole popularity of Korean food, because it wasn't popular at all in Canada, where I studied for many years. I worked in Korean restaurant and Japanese restaurant. Korean restaurants themselves, they couldn't sell Korean food. They had to sell with the Japanese, right? So this changed quite a lot. So that was my curiosity. But another more personal curiosity was mukbang phenomenon. And I just didn't quite understand what's going on with the mukbang popularity. So I got into it and I realized this is there's something more than eating here, right? So it feeds soul, but at the same time, there's a very, very kind of intense politics of emotion going on in mukbang. So that really fueled my interest. And when I finally got into Korean cooked food studies, many thanks to you, Robert. Your book, Dubious Gastronomy, was right there. And then that's how I kind of started exploring the food study. So I'm newbie compared to these two scholars who've been working on food for many years. So I'm gaining a lot of insights. And those of you who are interested in food, it is quite true that I'm a scholar of Korean literature, but then, you know, we don't have time to read literary works. We spend a lot of time writing about it and read a lot of those theoretical works.
Right, no more Moby Dick and more TikTok.
Right, exactly. And then students talking about webtoons these days, and it's so fun, they said. And I'm like, no, I don't even have time to read webtoons too. Right? So, but I totally share your experience with you. But what I also think interesting is that with the food, you can do a lot with literature, film, and visual works, and sociology, and humanities, philosophy. Because the food, I mean, it's everywhere. But when you think about what it represents, it's life and death. You know, it's quite extreme. Poverty and, you know, wealthiness, right? And a lot of things in between. And so if you're interested in food, okay, if you're interested in dish, for example, think about the significance of the dish, how that is being prepared, where the ingredients are from, right? Imagine that this society here, Korean Americans, didn't have a lot of Korean vegetables here. I don't know how many of you have seen Minari. Have you seen Minari? Right? So you've seen these films and you eat these vegetables. Have you wondered where they're from? Somebody is growing, right? Those vegetables. I know who. Some of them, right? So this is a kind of, you know, detective work, kind of detecting work. You try to investigate where that is from, what does that mean, who they are. That's the ingredients. But also at the same time, you can be a little more in a kind of conceptual work, such as what it means to have this, you know, representation, to see this representation of gender and sexuality in film and literature, for example. And Robert was talking about the fourth category, right? And people often talk about food porn, for example. You know, what is going on with the food porn? And you know, you can investigate that in some way. So you start with something close to you. I think that this is the beauty of food studies. It's not something like far away. It's so close to you, but it's so deep and wide. And start with something that really around you, right in front of you. I think that will be a good start. So that's what I wanted to say. Thank you.
And I would just, you know, I don't know if I have much to add beyond what my colleagues have already said. You know, I like to joke that I've never written a book about food, but I've never written a book without food. So for me, food is this way in. I'm really interested most of all in thinking about, like, how do we know what we know? Right? And I think that that's my deepest fundamental question in the classroom or in my research is how do we come to understand what we know as kind of received narratives? And that's a big question to start with. So oftentimes I look to popular culture because I think that it's an easy way for us to have this common ground. So, you know, it's very intimidating to ask a student or an interview subject, tell me who you are. How do you identify? I'm a scholar of race and ethnicity and identity. Tell me all about yourself. That is a very big question, and it gets you pretty much nowhere. But if I say, tell me about what you ate for lunch. Tell me about your most memorable meal. That gets me someplace else. Tell me about, you know, where you live now. How does that compare to where you grew up? That gives me this storytelling, this narrative about something way more than home or than food. It's a way into somebody's kind of self that doesn't require somebody to say, well, let me have this big narrative about who I am. I also love that food as a way in is this way to think about kind of the contradictions and the complexities of our everyday lives. Everyone eats, right? And sometimes that helps us think through as this idea of like poverty or access or food or health. Everyone eats. And so these ideas about what we eat, how we eat are very powerful, not just in terms of large culture about, you know, how we might drink differently, whether we're Russian or French or Korean, but how we might eat differently depending on where we grow up, what types of religious, cultural practices we have, what types of access we have to, you know, hot water, running water, heat, those types of things. So I think it's this really kind of just easily accessible way in. So I find it really, really fascinating. I also really like to eat, and I really like food, and I like to think about food. My other area of focus is urban studies, and there's a lot of relationship between food, dining culture, and gentrification that has just kind of been exploding these last 2 decades. And so to me, that's also a way to think about it. So I feel like I'm always living these contradictions of food, what is my role in the food industry as consumer, as critic, as scholar. So I encourage any of you who are interested in food to, yeah, it's a really rich way in.
Any questions in the audience? Oh, great, fantastic.
Thank you for a very informative and exciting panel. My name is Dan Pitt. I live in downtown Palo Alto. I'm a computer scientist, and want to thank my friend Wajung for alerting me to this opportunity. I have a question for you about sort of food culture and business. And you all come from sort of not on the coastal cities with large Korean populations, Ohio, New York, Pennsylvania. And I'm thinking about Korean restaurants, and maybe there's a difference between those in the heartland and those on the coasts. How do they go about thinking about being a successful restaurant? To what extent can they make a business case serving only Koreans in these cities versus non-Korean patrons? What does that do to how they treat their menu and the food, and how much can it be true to what you would actually find in Korea versus Americanized Korean food? And what is it, how do they create an identity as a restaurant in this American diasporic context?
Great, thank you.
That's a really complicated and difficult question, important one. I don't know where to begin. But one way to begin is this. Just recently, in January, this restaurant in LA, Koreatown, called The Dragon, after 40 years, they closed. They sold jjajangmyeon. They sold Chinese Korean food. But for 40 years, they were an establishment where people they had all these private rooms, where anyone in the LA area, I'm sure many have probably been there, had young, right? They had anything from birthdays to marriages to you name it, graduation party, that's where they had it. They just closed after 40 years. And guess who now is the face of jjajangmyeon in Korean K-Town? Park Jung-won, the biggest celebrity, food celebrity in all of Korea.
Yeah. Second biggest.
No, wait. You know what? I'm sorry, you're number 2 right now. Maybe soon you'll be number 1. I'm sorry. But, so the point is that there was a time in Koreatown, in LA, the mothership of the Korean diaspora, where the people who sold the food, Korean food, were actually like my mom and pops, who came from Korea, and in many ways their food was frozen in time. While in Korea, things are changing incredibly fast. In K-Town, they stayed the same. Until now, this generation or mom generation are all like retiring. By purpose, they made sure we didn't take over the restaurants. Right? They want us to be dyers, doctors, lawyers, whatever. And now what you see in K-Town is Korean corporations moving in and being gentrified. I don't know if it's a good thing, bad thing, it's a combination, but I see that as a trend. And so in the beginning, mostly Korean ethnics went to co-ethnic restaurants. But soon in LA, everyone started to go, especially barbecue. Right? But now, all the mom and pops are closing down one by one, and it's kind of a different place now. The days of the Korean riot, LA riots back and so forth, that era is now long gone. Now it's a whole different era I can't make sense of just yet. But I said that's a big difference is that. going from immigrant generation operator of businesses to now moneyed capital coming from Korea here?
You know, in the case of the Midwest, I grew up in the Midwest, and I still live in the Midwest, despite my move to California for grad school. You know, I think in the Midwest it's interesting because growing up, most of the Chinese restaurants in the area, most of them were not necessarily run by Chinese folks. And I think that you saw that kind of in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and then as Japanese food became popular, all these Japanese restaurants opened up. They also weren't run by Japanese folks. Most of these restaurants in the Midwest, particularly where I grew up, were run by Koreans. And you could tell because on the back, there would be like a few things Korean items that you could order. Or you would talk to the proprietors. But many of these restaurants that were Chinese, because you know America has this long love affair with Chinese food, were run by Koreans. As Robert's first book talks about, you know, this idea that even as close as 20 years ago, nobody ever thought, I love the way that Robert puts it, that you know Koreans' funky fermentation would ever be palatable to the mainstream. So that Koreans would run Japanese restaurants and Chinese restaurants primarily in the Midwest. It's really interesting in the past few years as K-food culture has gone global that like one of my favorite restaurants in Metro Detroit is a place called O Sushi. And so it used to be all Japanese food, and now more and more their Korean menu has been amplified so that now they actually have an English Korean menu, and it's now more of a Korean restaurant than it is a Japanese restaurant. They still have their sushi counter, and they haven't changed their name because they've been there for 20 plus years. But you're always going to O Sushi for like the best kalbijeong, which is very weird to think about. But it's kind of that context. And I think something else you said about kind of this globality, I would argue that Midwest food culture is maybe 15 to 20 years behind or LA. So, I mean, you still do have a lot of these kind of mom and pop type of spaces.
But these spaces are growing, right? We're talking about Atlanta, about Northern Virginia, about, New York and New Jersey.
And it's interesting because the demographics of who's dining in these places is very different. And I always joke, like, why couldn't the Korean wave come when I was growing up in the Midwest, right? Like, why did I have to tell people, like, no, Korea is not part of China, no, it's not the North one, no, you know, like all of these things, right? And so now everyone thinks it's very cool that, you know, I meet like young people and they're like, oh, you're Korean, that's so cool. And that was never my experience. So.
Yeah. I'll be very brief because you talked about all the important things, and I grew up in Korea, and I don't know so much about many cities in the United States. But what I can say is that I worked in Korean restaurants in Toronto for many years, and it wasn't really a Korean restaurant, it was a Japanese restaurant selling Korean food. And they were targeting, of course, immigrants, Korean immigrants. And these days, you know, they really changed a lot. It's like LA. And then it's important to see who the target audience they are aiming. And Professor Shin said there's a Yonggong restaurant. It sounds so chonti. The title, the name of the restaurant is right? Dragon or Hangukgwan or Seoul-gwan or something. These are for older generation, and the younger generation, they go, oh, sushi or something trendy. So you can see that the marketing strategy changed. And at the same time, I think this is what we're talking about here is American phenomenon. But here we have a lot of capital and a lot of Koreans. But this whole food wave also brought in the visibility of Korean diaspora in other parts of the world and how they practice their food. And food is so essential for them, right? Sure, it's a hybrid and so on. And in Russia or Kazakhstan, they don't have cabbage, so they use carrots to make kimchi or something like that. So they come up with alternatives, but still believe that it's kimchi, because that's a kind of, that embodies their identity and so on. So I think that that's one of the really positive aspects of this whole Korean food fad these days.
Yeah. Also, it's hard to underestimate the power of K-pop, especially during the pandemic, where because people were stuck at home, and Netflix all your shows on Netflix. You know, nation of kimchi, nation of kukbap, nation of jajang, you know, all this stuff has really, I think, enlivened interest more than ever in Korean food. And so, yeah, even 10 years ago, I would have been so shocked that people who thought doenjang or kanjang was, you know, or gochujang was something they could deal with. Now, that's nothing. Now they're just all so into it. So it's a whole new ball game.
Yeah, thanks to our chef.
Yeah. Yes.
All right, so as I said, 금강산도 식후경. So now that you've had your meal, we are actually going to have a small break. And there's a reception, I am told. Please, I'll have you know that scholars really love when people come up to them and continue the conversation. So for those of you who are too shy to come up to the microphones, please do come up and continue the discussion with our scholars. And a warm round of applause, please. Thank you very much.
Hello, everybody. I think we can start now, a few minutes earlier, but we can start. I'm so pleased to open this session. We're so excited to have amazing two chefs. My name is Soo Kim, and I run Stanford Food Design Lab at the School of Engineering. Our lab is doing research on future of food, kitchens, and restaurants with design thinking process. Today, we're so excited to have two chefs, Judy Joo and Soo-young, and they will share stories on how they have been introducing Korean cuisine to global audience through media in very unique way. Chef Judy Joo is Korean-American chef. She has engineering degree from Columbia University and worked, yeah, engineering. And worked as an institutional fixed income saleswoman at Morgan Stanley and became a French-trained chef. She was very first female Iron chef in the UK and the host of her own show, Korean Food Made Simple. She's now a restaurateur of Seoul Bird, what a nice name, right? In London, Las Vegas, and New York. Now we are going to have Judy to have her presentation. Okay.
Thank you. That's good. So I've been busy the past 12 or 15 years, and here today to talk about why I feel and how I've been participating in helping Korean food go global. And it starts out with my very serendipitous journey into the food world. You know, I have an engineering degree from Columbia University, and so I didn't start out wanting to be a chef. I wasn't allowed to start out being a chef. You know, I had a very typical tiger parent upbringing. My Korean immigrant parents, you know, were very much, you know, you're going to be a doctor. My father's a doctor, and so, you know, 3 piano lessons a week. If I didn't go to a certain school, I would cast shame on my family and generations to come. So I went to the safety school called Columbia and majored in engineering. And from there, just being in New York City, you couldn't help but feel the pulse of Wall Street. You know, the energy of Wall Street. I'm dating myself now, but this is back when the Wolf of Wall Street days were going on. You know, you could you know, see the money growing on trees. You know, Bear Stearns, Lehman Brothers, all these banks were still open. And so I ended up, you know, working at Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley. I took a full-time job at Morgan Stanley. I actually worked here in San Francisco at 101 California for a number of years. And I was working New York market hours on the West Coast. So I was up every single day at 3 in the morning, you know, grinding, got really burnt out. And I was like, you know what, after 5-6 years, I don't love this. I don't love creating alpha and finding value in the markets and trading and pushing paper around. And so I was like, you know what? I know what I do love. I loved cooking and I love food. And I had a stack of cookbooks next to my bed. I read cookbooks like fiction novels. Whenever I went to bookstores, I would buy Bon Appetit or Saveur, or, all the great cooking magazines and read them cover to cover. And so much to the chagrin of my parents, they, were not happy. I said, I'm quitting. And I'm going to go to cooking school. And they, threw a huge fit. They said, we work so hard. We paid all this money for you to go to an Ivy League school. You're going to peel potatoes for a living. And what are we going to say to our friends? And I was like, I don't really care. Your bragging rights are going to go away. That's fine. But I'm going to go to cooking school. So I enrolled at the French Culinary Institute in New York City, and I became a pastry chef. And I most immediately started working in magazines. I worked at Saveur. I worked at Time Out. I was writing. I was working in the test kitchens. I also started a nonprofit slow food in schools program in Harlem, similar to the Edible Schoolyard here that Alice Waters started. And I cut my teeth in kitchens at the Gordon Ramsay restaurant group. And it was hard, I would have to say, but worked my way up slowly. I'll talk more about that a little bit later. But then I eventually opened up my own restaurants, Jinju, which you saw some clips of. I had 2 locations in London and 1 in Hong Kong. And now I have a fast casual quick serve concept specializing in Korean fried chicken called Soulbird. Now I'm going to go back a little bit to why I chose to specialize in Korean food. So food is highly emotional. It is so emotive. It's so provocative. We have so many strong food memories around what we eat. And so I felt, I'm following my passion right now, not a paycheck. I got to cook what I love. And food in my household was always a language of love. Even if I was feeling just a little bit sad, my parents would say, just eat this, it'll make you feel better. And so it was their way of giving me a hug from the inside out. And so I really felt that I had to cook from the heart. In order to do that, I had to cook Korean food. I've got, kimchi running through my veins, and it's the food that I know and I love best. And commercially, I also saw, running a restaurant is also running a business, and so I had this commercial side to me. There was a huge gap in the market, particularly in London. London is about, 5 to 7 years behind New York, and so there wasn't a single Korean restaurant that I was proud to take work colleagues or my non-Korean friends. The service was crap, lighting was offensive, there was no sign of a wine list, you couldn't get a good cocktail or anything, and the ambiance was diabolical. So I always felt that, Korea is such a beautiful country, it has such a rich history, such rich culture. Why isn't there a restaurant that shows off and showcases all of the beautiful fabrics and design and woodwork of Korea? So I was like, this is what I wanted to do, so I had a mission. And I also had a mission to spread Korean flavors around the world. I always felt that Korea was the unsung hero of Asia, and it deserved a place among the great cuisines. So this is why I chose Korean food. And so going back to my journey from call me chef, working very, very low-level kitchen work to celebrity chef, quote unquote, it was a lot of hard work. In the first slide, I had that picture of the mountains of the journey, and that path has not been straight at all. It's been full of failure, full of rejection. It's been an uphill, windward climb most of the time. So it looks very glamorous, but it is blood, sweat, and tears, hard work, let me tell you. When I started out in the Gordon Ramsay restaurants, I was picking off stems off of spinach leaves. I was juicing crates of lemons with just a fork. It is grunt, brutal work. You're standing on your feet for 15 to 16 hours a day, but if you stick with it, you will slowly get promoted and make your way up. And I started doing some small segments on television along the way. I got, to meet some people, and then the whole Iron Chef gig came up. And this is 10, 12, maybe 13 years ago. Iron Chef was a huge global franchise. Iron Chef Australia, Iron Chef Vietnam, Thailand, Japan, and 30-something seasons in the United States. When Iron Chef UK came up, everyone and their mother went for the casting call, and I threw my hat into the ring. And I didn't think I had any chance at all. I was, I didn't have my own restaurant. I didn't, have really anything under my belt, but I had charisma. And so I went for it, and casting call after casting call, I finally landed the gig, and I was the first female Iron Chef in the UK, the second female Iron Chef globally after Kat Cora, and that really kind of was a pivotal point in my career. The people who produced Iron Chef in America were consulting for Iron Chef UK, and those guys saw me, they liked me, started bringing me over to the United States more, so coming back home, and that's when I started doing more work with Iron Chef America, becoming a regular face on Food Network, and also led to my own show, which you saw clips of, Korean Food Made Simple, which was played globally on Food Network and affiliated channels around the world. And it has 2 seasons, also on Amazon Prime right now, little plug. And that also led to my own books. You can see the covers here. Judy Joo's Korean Soul Food and Korean Food Made Simple, lots of different variations of the covers. It's been reprinted so many times. And also that led to doing many different morning segments. As you saw, I've been cooking everywhere on Today's Show, Good Morning America, Wendy Williams, The Talk, The View, everything. So it's been a fun ride. But what I really love is the fact that I'm able to spread the Korean flavors on a national level and give people a little glimpse into what Korean cooking is all about. I have a new show coming out on Food Network in May and June, and also another couple of books in 2025 and 2026. I've also been able to do some great brand collaborations with some amazing companies across the board in terms of lifestyle, everything from Tory Burch, thank you for my shirt, to Joe Malone, and even Korean companies in the car space and everything. And I write for a lot of great magazines and newspapers also. I love the writing. It's another creative outlet for me. And I'm also able to cook all over the world and in random places like the Maldives and Nevis in the Caribbean and Switzerland. And I just cooked in Jakarta and also in Thailand. So that's been something that I really enjoy, again, spreading Korean flavors around the world in a meaningful way. And also traveling is a place where I gather a lot of inspiration. So I'm able to cook all over the world because Korean food is so good. And why is Korean food so good and so incredibly popular? And so I think that there are a few overarching themes. Number one, I think, is the variety of Korean cuisine. In England, there is a saying, and it's how you eat, they say meat and 2 veg. That is so boring. In Korea, it's meat and like 20 different kinds of vegetables. And because of that, right, it is so incredibly colorful, it's full of texture, full of diversity and everything, and it's based on the philosophical value of the rule of 5, that's obangsek. And so this goes into also why Korean food is so incredibly good for you, and so nutritious, and where food is medicine, it's all about balance and harmony, which we'll talk about a little bit more too, but you really are what you eat. And another reason why Korean food is also so good and delicious and also good for you is because it's really grounded in fermentation. The cornerstones of Korean cuisine, are gochujang, the fermented chili paste, doenjang, the fermented soybean paste, and gangjang, the soy sauce. And then on top of that, you have things like kimchi, which is fermented Korean vegetable. It's actually an umbrella term for over 100 different types of kimchis that are probably out there. And all of this fermentation leads to really great, rich, complex umami flavors and makes the cuisine taste so damn good, right? And another thing is the fermentation is also very good for you. Kimchi is full of lactobacillus. It's considered a superfood. So again, good for you, tasty, why not? It's also a very fun cuisine. Whenever I take my Western friends out to a traditional Korean restaurant, they're floored. The way that Koreans eat is so unique, and I think that it is something that should be celebrated. I don't necessarily agree all the time when we try to force Korean food into like a 16 little course tasting. I think the hanshik table, where you get lots of little dishes for everybody to share, is something that is so convivial, something that is so interactive and should be really celebrated, and uniquely Korean. My friends who come, they're like, all of this comes for free? Wait, we didn't order this? Wait, what? And they're confused, and they're like, and if you eat it all, you get more? They're floored by it. So I think that that's something that is so uniquely Korean and what makes the food so popular. Also, the fact that you can make every bite to what you like. So there's a personalization of the food. If you're eating Korean barbecue, when you make sam, you don't have to put kimchi. You can put as much samjang as you want to. You can put rice. So you can make everything bespoke. So going back also to variety, there's a huge diversity of Korean cuisine, which is mostly untapped by the Western market. People know a few dishes, but they don't know the bountiful harvest of Korea. And so Korea also has 4 different distinct seasons. It really bothers me when I do these presentations, not so much with this crowd. People think Korea is a tropical country. I don't know why. Everyone says it's in Southeast Asia. Like, what are you talking about? Like, we just hosted the Winter Olympics not that long ago. I've had so many interviews where people are like, oh, wait, what? And I'm like, no, it snows and it gets hot. So, because of the seasonal differences, that also lends itself to great diversity. And also, we are harvesting from the sea. We're harvesting from the mountains, the valleys, the fields, everything. I can't even tell you how many times every single time I go back to Korea, I try something new and different, something weird from the sea, some kind of animal or something that I've never seen before, or some kind of amazing root vegetable or mountain vegetable. And it's truly, truly, truly a discovery every single time I go back. It's an adventure. I love the diversity also from high end to low end. You can eat on the street, or you can eat in a 3 Michelin-starred restaurant. So I love the flexibility of the cuisine in that sense. And you're seeing this a lot right now in New York. The New York chefs are killing it right now. They're churning out the Michelin stars. I'm so proud of the younger generation coming up. And there's some exquisite food going on in New York. I also think the history of Korea is something very, very special because there are a lot of other war-torn countries. But I'm living in London right now, but Londoners don't still embrace tinned meats and like the food of the war. Korea still loves spam. Even the war is long over. We still love budae-jjigae, the army barracks stew, which, every time you stick a spoon in, something random comes out. It's like baked beans, plastic American cheese, spaghetti, Vienna sausages, spam, all this stuff. So I think that the fact that we are also embracing our history and embracing the foods that we once ate because we had to, we now love and still eat because we want to, is something that is quite unique. And I love spam. I grew up eating spam, so all for spam. I also love the fact that Korean food is so easy to adapt and fuse with other cuisines. We're seeing this here in California with the Korean-Mexican craze. I'm seeing it a bit in London with Korindian food, as I call it, Korean-Indian food. So it's extremely flexible and versatile as well. And last but foremost is the craveability factor. It is so good. Korean flavors are punchy, it's vibrant, they're in your face, and there is a serious addictive quality about it. So what am I most passionate about when it comes to cooking? So cooking for me is not just about the food, it's about the memories that you're creating. Food, like I said before, is so extremely evocative. We all have such strong food memories. And I love creating those memories, even if it's just for a few hours. I always loved restaurants because you leave all of your problems on the doorstep, and once you walk through the door, you can be transported to Brazil, Korea, Japan, England, Switzerland for just a few hours and have a great time with some friends. And so for me, it's about sharing, it's about creating those memories and creating core memories. It's all about love. Food really is a language of love. And so I said this in my video, I love the fact that I'm spreading Korean flavors around the world. And for me, this doesn't have to be 100% authentic. And I get criticized for this sometimes, but I don't care. Because I don't think people in Kansas or Arkansas are gonna actually make kimchi jjigae or budae-jjigae, But they might buy a bottle of kimchi, they might buy a tub of gochujang, and if they take a dollop or a spoonful of that gochujang and put it into their spaghetti sauce, I think that that's a success. And so that's how a cuisine goes global. I love the fact that in London, and London's behind New York, my cheese toasty place, his grilled cheese sandwiches, has a kimchi option on it. That to me is a success, and that's how a cuisine goes global. It can just be one ingredient that everybody loves, but they enjoy it and they love it in their own way and in their own culture. A dash of Korea is what I call it. So just put a dash of Korea on everything. So how has Korean cuisine changed in my lifetime? Okay, so I'm much older than probably a lot of people in here, but I have literally gone from being embarrassed from my lunchbox when I was in grade school to now being spammed like crazy. Like, what are these people eating in this show? What are they drinking? Whatever. And it's created this like kind of weird cultural voyeurism that's going on, which I love, but at the same time, it's a complete 180, so I'm still getting used to it. When I was growing up, Japanese culture was very in vogue, and now Korean culture is so zeitgeist. And of course, this is being driven by K-pop tremendously, BTS being compared to the Beatles, and and the BTS fandom, the stans, as you young people call them, I mean, they are engaged, they are completely active. I mean, who isn't afraid of the BTS army these days, right? And also, Korean dramas are translated into over 90 different languages around the world. People are addicted to them, honestly. And so and because of beautiful people like here, like watching Korean dramas and Squid Games, one of the most watched programs on Netflix ever, movies like Parasite, etc. So these are all huge driving factors, and even Korean beauty. So all of this creates the Hallyu wave. It's the Korean wave, which is crashing on the shores all around the world, and it's really affecting Korean cuisine, of course, with that. So just to give a couple of statistics, there was a 90% growth in Korean cuisine interest from 2021 to 2022 globally. And in 2022, Korean cuisine was the 5th most popular Googled ethnic cuisine search for. So people are curious, but they're also looking to learn more, which is very, very interesting and promising. And I've been seeing this, like, believe me, I wouldn't be able to do pop-ups around the world if there wasn't an interest, and in random parts of the world. So I personally believe that the Korean wave is still going strong. We're seeing it crash on the shores, but eventually the waves are gonna come to the heartland, to the middle of the country, and you will see people maybe in Kansas or in Arkansas, cooking some more authentic dishes. But again, I don't feel that things have to be authentic, and I think I have this term called just a splash or a dash of Korea is fine. And I think it's so extremely successful to be able to translate your culture. So here I've got a couple or 3 pictures of some dishes that have been very popular. They're more desserts because I don't really feel that Korea does desserts well. But so I've done a makgeolli frozen yogurt that you can see up there. So just with some mango and coconut on top. And that I've served everywhere from like Italy to Switzerland or whatever. People love it. They love the taste of makgeolli. And then in the middle, I have a seaweed or kim shortbread. It's salty and sweet. That was obviously inspired from my time in the UK. And that one I serve, kind of as a petit four sometimes. And then on the end, I have a yuja cha lemon posset, which is a type of pudding. So, Korean flavors can be applied in so many different ways and can be welcoming and inviting to everyone. And so everyone can find a place in their most beloved grandmother's recipe and just add a splash or a dash of Korea and make it somewhat more interesting or better. So thank you, everyone. Yeah. It's just an image of Soulbird from London, and I've taken a lot of design elements from traditional Korea, even like the Hwatu cards. I put our logo in and everything, and so I'm really embracing all areas of Korean culture and design and showcasing it. So thank you.
So now second speaker, Chef Soo-young. He's actor from South Korea, started his acting career at the age of 20 and featured in 40 drama series and movies. He earned his fame as a chef on the TV cooking show Fun Restaurant, aka Pyeonsto랑, aired on KBS. His cooking journey extends online, where his YouTube recipes are viewed over 100 million times, sharing his love for cooking with a global audience. And we also have Raymond Ha as a translator. He's Stanford alumnus and works at the Committee for Human Rights in North Korea. He's a freelance interpreter and enjoys eating cold noodles, naengmyeon, with his grandfather whenever he visits Korea. Now we are going to have Soo-young comes on the stage to give a presentation.
Hello. Oh, many cameras over there. Yes, it's me. Yes. Yes, I'm very honored to be here today to share my story in front of you all. My name is Soo-young, and I'm an actor. But I'm here to speak about Korean cuisine. An actor talking about Korean food. Can you believe it? Yeah. At first, I felt a little bit awkward when I got the invitation from Stanford University because I have 26 years of acting experience in over 40 drama series and films. Yet, I have invited here as a chef. Actually, it's still strange for me that people think of me as a chef because I think of myself first as an actor. But until only 2 years ago, my lovely daughter thought I was chef because most of my drama and movies are not suitable for children under 5 years old. So, but she can watch only my cooking show. But thank you. I have been acting for 26 years, and I have been working as a chef for 4 years. 26 years versus 4 years. But I recognize immediately what I am. Although I don't have my own restaurant, I'm a chef in my country, Korea. I have been hosting a cooking show called Foodways, where I introduce recipes every Friday. Thanks to recipes that I have developed that are easy, simple, and affordable, I have gained a lot of love from people. I have become famous as a chef as well. Cooking, which was a hobby I really loved, to become a job without me realizing it. As an actor, my recent works are Queenmaker and Bloodhound, which was streamed on Netflix last year. One was about a politician who ran for a mayor of Seoul, and the other was about motorcycle riding killer. And you know what was interesting? The politician I played at Queenmaker was actually a Stanford graduate. So I felt destined to be invited here. At that time, my schedule was really packed. The two shows almost completely overlapped during the production period. But thanks to that, one day I was a politician, the next day I was a killer. And in the meantime, I kept working as a chef. I didn't even have time to blink, really. I continued to develop recipes and introduce cooking on my cooking show. I didn't want to forget the people who were waiting for my recipe every Friday night. Most Koreans have to do their cooking on the weekends for their families. Korea has unique side dish culture called banchan. That differs from the concept of side dishes elsewhere. Typically, a meal includes at least 3 or more, too many, yes, 3 or more side dishes, banchan. And plus, among with the main dishes, soup and stew is also essential. The essence of Korean cuisine is creating a harmony of various flavors around rice with multiple side dishes, banchan. That's why Korean family feeder always need recipes. Having tried both professions, actor and cooking, I realized that being a chef could give my life meaning. And I thought, anyone can live without watching TV, but no one can live without food. Looking back. So today, I stand here as a chef, I think. Looking back, I was always curious about cooking. When I was 8 years old, I cooked my first dish all by myself. That kid makes something. What is that? It was bread. Yes, I wanted to eat bread, but I didn't know how to make it exactly. So I put flour, baking powder, water, salt, sugar, and everything that was in my house and baked it in the microwave. Guess what? Imagine. It turned into a lump of baked flour that couldn't really be called bread. But I can find the picture. I'm sorry. The lump of baked flour, yes. And it tasted like a dusty bookshelf. But my neighbor's grandmother said it was delicious and ate half of it. Yes. I'm sorry. That's when I first felt that cooking is truly enjoyable and joyful. I was so happy. And that memory has made cooking a joyful thing for me since then. I'm still grateful, Mrs. Song, for eating my lump of baked flour. Really, thank you. Really. Then, when I was 10, we finally got an oven. Yes, oven, finally. And I made cookies, but this time I made them from a cookbook called Western Cuisine. It was a big and thick and heavy book, not for reading, for decoration, you know. But I read it every day. In early 19th in Korea, baking cookies at home were very rare thing to do. Imagine your 10 years old niece making Korean rice cake in the kitchen. My mom was amazed and I was so thrilled. That's still vivid in my memory. So one day, I asked my mom to buy me a set of cookbooks. I read them over and over again. At that time, everyone read newspaper or comics when they sat on the toilet. How about you? No? Not yet? Yes, it was 35 years old, so there was no smartphones. So people used to read newspaper or comics, but I read cookbooks. Truly. Don't worry, I don't do that anymore. I know it's very weird thing, yeah. But looking back, those moments makes me realize where my passions for cooking started, and I wouldn't trade them for anything. The child became a young man and went to college. At that time, there was a real famous cooking show called the Best Meal Show, 최고의 밥상 in Korean. And I decided to give it a shot with my two college friends. Yeah, it's me. Older than now, I think. Why? What's the problem? Yes. I'm sorry. It was a survival cooking show where ordinary people make dishes and compete against each other. If you win, there are prizes. The team who won 3 rounds in a row would get the grand prize, which was a travel package to Paris. Oh, Champs-Élysées. I really want the prize, but yes, it was really big. I'm sorry. I'm too sorry. Where is it? Okay. It was a big deal back then because it was the time of IMF in Korea, which was a big economic downfall in Korean history. My friends and I lived together and stayed awake for 3 days preparing the competition dishes. Our highlight dish was wrapping bacon around bulgogi like a donut and baking pineapple on top and with caramel soy sauce. It was so nice, I promise. We won the first round and we won the second round as well. And the final round, yes, we didn't get a chance to see the Eiffel Tower ever, unfortunately. But we had a really good time. Surprisingly, after the broadcast, I was invited to audition for drama series from showrunner. At the time, becoming an actor seems like an impossible dream, but I couldn't let this great opportunity pass by, so I decided to give it another shot. Happily, I passed the audition and I made my debut as an actor. This was 1999. My first role was pretty small. I was Doctor Number 2. I didn't even have a name. It was so sad. When I started acting, I hit. There is another story. Yes, I filmed all day long, but only my back and my fingers on screen 3 or 4 times. But all actors go through that process, and so did I. When I started acting, I hit opposition from my close friends and family, including my parents. My major in college was business administration, and my father was a professor of business administration. It was natural for them to worry, so I told them I would try acting for 3 years. If I didn't succeed, I would quit and join the military. As you know, all men in Korea must serve military service for about 2 years, even if you are BTS You have no choice. You have to go. I worked hard for 3 years, really hard. It was really tough years. I bet everything I had on acting, and I went to audition nonstop. In the meantime, I got the chance to audition for the main role of the villain. And I was given only 2 days' notice to show up for filming. I received the script with no time to prepare. I think I got only about 10 hours of sleep per week. At that time, it was really tough, but I did my best. Really, it was my best, yeah. As a villain, yes. However, the drama exceeded 40% in ratings, and I won the Rookie of the Year award. The opposition at home turned into support. I was too busy as an actor in my 20s and 30s to cook as much as I used to, but I still enjoyed cooking and seeing people enjoy my food. When I cook, my mind gets clear. Cooking is yoga for me. Even now, when I feel down, I pickle people. I pickle food. I don't pickle people. Yes. I'm sorry. I'm always confused. I pickle the food or knee bread. It's my meditation. And then, in the summer of 2020, right after people started cooking japaguri with steak from Parasite, you know what is this? Yes, japaguri with steak. At the time, I received an offer to appear on cooking show, but I hesitated at first because I thought, why would I want my hobby to become a job? When something becomes a job, it can lose its fun. That's true. But I was told that the prize money from winning at this cooking show would be donated to underprivileged children, so I decided to participate. I showcased my usual home-cooked meals using my home kitchen as a stage. Even now, my cooking show is filmed in my small kitchen. Small? Yes, really small. But my hobby and profession were different. Cooking and teaching how to cook were different. I have to measure everything precisely, and I focused on every detail so that even those who couldn't cook could follow along. My very first dish was 감자탕. Yes. It's a pork backbone stew, a very popular stew in Korea. In restaurant, it can cost about $10 per serving, but I realized that with $10, I could buy 7 pounds of pork backbone and make enough 감자탕 for my whole family and my neighbors. Really. It means I can even hold a garden party with $10. Really. From the first broadcast, the response was more enthusiastic than anyone expected. People started following my cooking and sharing their photos on social media. Viewers were surprised that a famous actor knew the exact price of lettuce, chicken, and carrots better than they did. People loved my recipe because I made a decent home-cooked meal with simple ingredients at an affordable price. But I guess the most important thing was that all this happened during the year of COVID-19. People couldn't go restaurant, and they were getting sick of their options that were very expensive. So also, many companies started remote work, so people had to cook at home. If they didn't know how to cook, they would have to make frozen meals or instant noodle or something. I think that eating well was more challenging than social distancing. So people started cooking, and they needed recipes. They weren't looking for fancy dishes for parties, but real practical recipe for daily life. I continued to create and refine recipes, simplifying cooking methods. I excluded premium ingredients and made maximal use of seasonal produce because they are the cheapest during the season. Health benefits were just a bonus. I was especially eager to target men who weren't comparable cooking. Nowadays, being able to cook well is essential even for men. Really. It's true. Men should know how to cook to have a good relationship and avoid, you know what? Divorce, breakups. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Yes, it's okay. It's okay. You're okay. In the last 4 years, I created over 290 home-cooked recipes and won 13 cooking competition. I developed a lot of new products and made a lot of donations. And now, many households love my fail-proof recipes. So this is my story of how I able to act through cooking and how I able to cook through acting. Did you know my name, Soo-young, is my stage name? My real name is, who do you know? Thank you. Thank you. My real name is Nam-son. Thank you. Nam-son. Yeah, it's my real name. When I cook, I use Nam-son. Yes. And I gain my nickname on my show. It's Nam Senseng. Senseng means teacher in Korea. So I really love my nickname. Teaching cooking and sharing it with people is greatest joy in my life. I love encouraging young people to start cooking Korean food easily and helping retired couples make a real food instead of frozen meals with simple recipe and affordable price. It's the most meaningful thing in my life. When I walk down the street, people sometimes come up to me and tell me that you gave me a great dinner last night. Even though I didn't do anything for them, they just followed my recipes and enjoyed their food for dinner. That's the most rewarding moment for me. Acting and cooking are quite similar to me in preparing, presenting, and finding meaning in people's reaction. Lastly, here is a phrase I really like to wrap up today's talk. Some time ago, I heard a phrase that goes like this. I read a book on my bookshelf, and now I'm no longer the same person. I changed this phrase like this. I took out a frying pan from my kitchen, and now I'm no longer the same person. Let's keep cooking. Thank you.
Wow. So now we're going to do a panel talk, and I'm going to start with some questions. So we learned from Judy that Korean cuisine has like 오방색, the color of 5. And in cooking, what is your favorite sense among 5 and why? Can we start with Nam Senseng?
Yes, thank you. Actually, I like red, but white is essential of Korean cuisine. I think. 그다음부터 한국말로 할게요. 너무 오방색 너무 어려워서. 오방색은 사실은 방향을 나타내는 말이고 방향이 다 정해져 있어요. 그 동아시아에서 같이 쓰는 개념이긴 한데 사실 네팔에 가도 오방색이 있고 중국에도 있고 한국에도 있는데 이 오방색을 음식에 잘 반영한 건 한국이 최고가 아닐까라고 생각을 해요. 전 그중에 하얀색이 제일 좋아요. 왜냐하면 우리의 모든 식사는 밥을 중심으로 이루어져 있고 밥과의 컨비네이션이 가장 중요한 식사 문화를 갖고 있어요. 그래서 그 중심이 되는, 물론 옛날엔 하얀 쌀밥을 먹지 못했죠. 우리가 100년 전만 해도 이런 흰 쌀밥을 먹지 못했어요. 약간 일제강점기 이후로 좀 바뀐, 분도수가 바뀐 이유긴 한데 어쨌건 전 모든 한식의 밥상에서 가장 기본이 되는 밥, 흰색, 그 흰색을 에센셜로 뽑고 싶습니다.
So the concept of 오방색, it's a directional concept where there's a color indicating each direction. You see this throughout East Asia. You see it in China. You see it in Nepal. You see it in Korea. But I think the unique thing about Korea is that we've integrated this concept really closely with our food. And among the 5 colors, I would say white is the most important. So as you know, white rice is central to Korean food. And it's about how you pair other things with rice. Again, we didn't eat white rice even just 100 years ago, but now it's basically the center of Korean cuisine, and that's why I chose the color white.
Let's have a Judy.
Are you
you can talk about your favorite color in cooking or favorite sense.
My favorite sense. I'll talk about the favorite sense.
Mm-hmm.
I think so. Either like visual,
smell.
Taste, smell. So I feel the one that trumps everything is smell, actually, because if something looks beautiful, you know, you won't eat it if it smells rancid. You know, you could be in the most beautiful hotel room, the most beautiful room. If it smells foul, you can't stay in that room. I have been lured into some really awful-looking dive places to eat, where you just want to close your eyes just from the smell of the food, which is so incredibly good. And you just, you know, have to close your eyes and you just eat there. So I think the smell of food is the most important.
Yeah.
sense.
Wow. Okay.
맞아, 저도 비슷하게 생각해요. 아까 제가 질문을 너무 오방색에만 했는데 너무 오방색 얘기만 하다 끝났는데 오방색 저 한 가지밖에 얘기를 못 합니다. 죄송합니다. 냄새 말씀하셨으니까 저는 한 가지 더 하자면 texture가 되게 중요한 것 같아요. 사실 코를 막고 먹으면 식감이 비슷한 음식은 우리가 잘 구별하지 못한대요. 맛이란 건 착각이기 때문에 냄새와 식감이 나를 지배하는 거거든요. 그래서 냄새가 99면 전 식감은 1%지만 그 1%가 정하는 건 굉장히 다양해서 하다못해 우리가 국수를 삶을 때 알단텐지, 벤코톤지 그 1, 2분 사이에 엄청난 식감 차이가 나잖아요. 국수도 그런 차이를 구별하는 것이 우리 인간의 현대 그리고 이런 식감을 구분하는 우리가 굉장히 미세한 기능을 타고났는데 저는 냄새 말고 또 한 가지를 정하자면 다른 거 다 빼고 식감이라고 생각합니다.
So I realized that I answered the wrong question. I talked too much about colors. Sorry, I can only think of one thing at a time. So now I'll actually answer the question. Chef Judy mentioned smell. I also think if I were to add one more thing, it would be texture, how it feels in your mouth. So if you eat the same food and you block your nose, you can't tell what it is. So in this sense, taste is really an illusion. It's 99% smell and it's 1% texture. We all have this sense where even when you're making pasta, depending on how long you keep it in the water, it feels different in your mouth. So, of course, smell is very important, but I also think the texture matters when you're making food.
Thank you. So I studied chefs for my PhD work, and I truly believe that they're artists. They're most sensitive, sensible, creative people. So I honor your sensitivity, your creativity, and this is amazing answers. So I'm gonna ask Judy, what made you lead into different careers, different professions? Like, what made you? What was the motivation behind?
I think whenever you do like a drastic career change, there's always a push and a pull. So you have to be so dissatisfied where you are that you're kind of pushing out, and then something that lures you, you know. So there is a bit of both. And for me, it was the lure of the kitchen. It was the lure of food, and also just being wholly unsatisfied, working in finance, and you know, I didn't love it. I didn't have a passion for it. And you know, you have one life to live, and there's a famous saying from Confucius that, you know, actually everybody has 2 lives, and the second one begins when you realize you only have one, you know. And so this is kind of the philosophy that I took upon. It's like, you know what, I'm gonna follow this crazy dream I have and just do it. But it takes like a certain personality to do that, just to be a total rebel and to, you know, say screw you to your parents, screw you to everybody, you know what I mean? And so like, it's not for everyone, you know. You have to be comfortable with going against the grain. You have to be comfortable with like being the first, you know. You have to be comfortable with a high level of risk. You know, I'm an entrepreneur now, and it's like, you know, it's like the risks that you take every single day. It's like you have to be willing to bet on yourself, and that's very difficult to do. You know, it's very easy. It's not very easy, but it's easier maybe to work for a large company like the Morgan Stanleys of the world. But to work for yourself and to bet on yourself and to kind of get up and to motivate yourself and to deal with so much rejection and failure on a regular basis, because that's obviously part of the story of success, is tough. But you have to just have a formidable spirit and believe in yourself no matter what. Maybe it's like naivete, but yeah. That's kind of what it
I have a
takes.
huge respect for all the chefs. They have to work long hours, like even Christmas Eve, like everybody have like fun with their family and friends, and they're having really like, I don't know, I have a huge respect for all the chefs for cooking amazing meal for everybody. So, okay, for Soo-young. So you have a dual jobs, being an actor and chef. What are the challenges of doing both, and what are the advantages?
둘 다 쉽진 않아요. 둘 다 쉽진 않은데 글쎄요. 둘 다 어려워요. 왜냐하면 요리를 만들면은 저 같은 경우에는 정말 많은 분이 그 다음 날 바로 따라하세요. 그러니까 절대로 실패하면 안 돼요. 맛이 없으면 난리가 나요. 뭐야, 짜다, 달다. 전 제일 무서운 말이 짜다예요. 그 다음 무서운 게 달다. 잘 싱거운 게 나요. 그래서 짜다 달다가 제일 무서운데, 그러려면 저는 계속 밤새도록 한 일주일 넘게 계속 간을 맞추고 스푼 단위로 계량을 바꾸고 해서 레시피를 준비해서 방송을 하는데, 연기도 마찬가지예요. 제가 작년에 했던 연기 같은 것도 보통 한 페이지를 1000번 정도 보거든요. 중요한 씬은. 그럼 이제 종이가 너덜너덜해지는 게 아니고 머리가 너덜너덜해질 정도로 보는데, 비슷한 힘이 들긴 하는데, 그래서 저는 다행히 어느 게 힘들다가 중요한 게 아니고, 되게 중요한 거는 두 직업이 저를 같이 올려줘요. 연기를 할 때는 되게 요리가 하고 싶고, 요리를 할 때는 정말 미치게 연기가 하고 싶어요. 나 왜 그런지 몰라. 왜 그러지? 그러니까 연기를 할 때는 막 행복해, 연기해야지 해야 되는데, 연기할 때도 집에 가서 요리해야 되는데, 다음 주에 뭐 하지 요리? 이러고, 또 요리할 때는 왜 드라마가 안 들어오지? 막 이런 생각을 해요. 근데 그게 저를 같이 끌어올려줘요, 다행히. 그래서 다행히 드라마가 계속 들어오고, 가을에 또 촬영을 하고요. 요리 프로그램도 계속 할 수 있어서 정말 다행인 것 같아요. 그래서 이 두 가지가 둘을 질리지 않게 해주는 저의 약간 쌍두마차 같은 느낌이어서, 저는 가능하다면 앞으로 두 가지를 같이 죽어라고 한번 해보려고 합니다. 네. 감사합니다.
I would say they're both difficult. For cooking, the thing I have to remember is if I release a recipe on air, a lot of people follow it the next day. They try it themselves, and you don't want to see comments on the internet saying, "Oh, this is too salty," or "This is too sweet."
Yes.
I mean, people saying something is salty is worse than people saying something is bland. So to avoid that, I have to be very meticulous about how I put together my recipes. I have to be very precise about the ingredients I put in the seasoning. I need to get it exactly right. In terms of acting, if it's like an important scene, I literally look at that page of the script 1,000 times. And after you do that, I mean, your mind is fried. It's a very taxing experience. But when I take a step back and look at it, I feel like these two jobs help me keep my balance. They help me maintain a certain sense of balance and tension. So when I'm acting, I really want to cook. I'm always thinking about, okay, what am I going to cook next week? Conversely, when I'm cooking, I wonder, like, why am I not getting any scripts? Like, why isn't anything coming in? I think so. There's this healthy sense of tension between the two. I'll be working on a piece this fall, so I'll be working on that. Thankfully, I will be able to continue my cooking shows as well. And I really, really want to do both diligently and just keep doing both because they're very important elements of what keeps me going.
Cool. Great. So next question goes to Judy. So what is your strategy for introducing novel elements such as vegan or British cuisine to Korean cooking? What are some challenges?
The strategies around introducing. Could I get some water?
Yeah.
Sorry. Finished. Oh, thank you. Sorry. Thank you. So food is so dynamic, and there are trends that are coming and going, and vegan cuisine is one of them. And it was a trend that was taking over for a long time. Every single time I went on air, or cooking on a show or something, like, can you cook something vegan? Can you cook something vegan? I was getting so bored of it, right? But I was noticing that actually, because one of my soul birds is next to a vegan restaurant. A vegan restaurant was like empty all the time, all the time, and actually ended up going out of business. It was only open for about like 8 months to a year. So I didn't actually believe the trend, even though there seemed to be so much demand for it. I think California is a special place where, like maybe it was happening more here, but in London, it was trending, but I don't think people were not eating vegan all the time. Like maybe they did it once a week or when they felt like it, or it was kind of in vogue just to say you're vegan for a little bit. But adapting Korean food to becoming vegan is actually quite easy because there's so many vegetables and all the great ingredients that make Korean food taste good, like gochujang and doenjang and kind of are actually vegan. So that's not that huge of a leap, but what's interesting is fusing the food with another culture. So I just cooked for the Prime Minister and President Yoon when the presidential visit, and my remit was to do all British canapes but with Korean twists.
Wow.
So this was fun actually for us. So we did fish and chips mandu. We did pigs in the blanket with samjang. We did so we took all of the best and the greatest of British cuisine and made it more flavorful, which was fun. So, but it's Korean flavors are easily transferable, very very versatile to lots of different cuisines, and everything add a splash of Korea, a dash of Korea, kimchify it, as I say, add some kimchi, and even with the fish and chips mandu, we did a kimchi tartar sauce that turned out really really nice, and I can't even remember, we did like a kalbi, skewer with some truffle mayonnaise and things, and so it works really really well, and it pushes your creativity, but it's fun. I actually enjoy it. Yeah.
Sounds so yummy. I can't wait to taste some of them.
Yeah.
So next question goes to Soo-young. So you do airing almost every Friday now, and how do you develop your recipes? And your recipes has been very successful online. And what was your success factor is?
저는 레시피를 만들 때 처음에 맛있게 딱 만들어요. 내가 만약에 갈비찜을 만들겠다, 제대로 된 걸 딱 만들어요. 족발을 만들겠다, 제대로 제가 할 수 있는 만큼 최대한 노력해서 셰프처럼 만들어요. 그 다음 스텝은 하나씩 빼요. 다 빼요. 만약에 구워서 삶는 거면 굽기만 하거나 삶기만 하거나 조리법도 다 생략해요. 그래서 어디까지 남겼을 때도 원래랑 가장 흡사한가. 그러니까 노력을 줄이는 일을 해요. 저는 여러분의 노력을 줄이는 일을. 그게 아마 석세스 포인트가 아닌가 생각을 해요. 그러면 과정이 줄어들면 실패 확률이 줄어들거든요. 그리고 저는 가장 중요한 게 물량을 늘 통제해요. 한국 음식은 국물 기반이에요. 모든 음식이 국물이 있어요. 파스타가 한국에 와도 국물이 흥건해져요. 그냥 이건 뭐 짬뽕인지 파스타인지 알 수 없어. 안 그러면 사람들이 뻑뻑해서 못 먹어요. 우리나라 사람들은 침이 나오는 게 되게 중요하거든요. 그래서 모든 음식이 간이 좀 있고 아니면 국물 음식이거나 그래야 밥을 넘길 수 있으니까. 그래서 저도 항상 물량을 정확하게 정해줘요. 물은 한 컵. 뭐 국을 끓여도 물은 2리터. 그러면 실패하지 않거든요. 보통은 물을 많이 넣거나 거기에 계속 양념을 첨가하다가 결국 국을 막 이만큼 끓이게 되거든요. 그런 경험 있으실 거예요. 그걸 제가 해요. 통제, 그러니까 그 물량 통제, 그리고 하나씩 빼는 요리법. 그래서 제가 최소한의 것만 알려드리는 거. 그게 제 비결이라면 비결이에요.
So when I develop recipes, say you're making like galbijjim, which is like a beef, marinated beef rib, or some other dish. I do it as if I were a professional chef. So I make it as tasty as possible, I make it as fancy as possible. And what I do is then I take one thing out at a time to try and make it more simple. So for example, if the recipe calls for roasting something and then boiling it, I would just take out the roasting and just go straight to the boiling. So the idea behind this is to make it as easy as possible for people to repeat the recipe. So whenever you're cooking in a recipe, if the process is too complicated, you can make mistakes. But if the process is simple, the risk of failure goes down. And the most important thing I do is I'm very, very precise about the amounts. And this matters especially in Korean cuisine, because Korean cuisine is based around soup, it's based around broth. Just as an example, when Korean people eat pasta, suddenly there's just a lot of water. It's like the pasta is in soup. You can't tell if it's pasta or jampong. But this matters to Korean people. It needs to be seasoned right, and they really, really like soup and broth. So it matters to get the right amount of water in, for instance, or get the right amount of seasoning in. And I'm sure many of you have experienced yourself. You're making some broth, you get the amounts wrong, and you make too much, like more than you can handle. So it's very, very important to get the amounts exactly right. And so if I tell people the exact amounts, make the process as simple as possible, then people can repeat it very easily with a very, very low risk of failure. And that's what I think explains why my recipes have caught on.
Thank you. I just want to inform the audience that we'll have an opportunity have some of you to ask questions to these chefs. So as Daphna said earlier, think of your questions earlier and identify yourself and then be brief. So while we'll finish a few questions, you can be ready for open mic. So Judy, so you've been traveling a lot, going to many different places, running your businesses, different locations. So what are the next projects? And what are you excited about?
Next projects are, well, there's a new TV show on Food Network coming out in May or June time, so I'm not allowed to talk about that yet, but that's done filming, so look out for that. I'm also working on another book, and actually 2 books. One that is basically, it's actually similar to what you're doing, but it's Korean food in 30 minutes or less. So very simple, quick recipes for the home cook, which is fun and exciting. And the other one is basically based around the cooking around Korean dramas and K-pop, which will be fun. And Soulbird is expanding throughout the United States, which is exciting. And also in the UK, we are opening up in Edinburgh Airport, which will be fun. We have some more projects that we're in legal right now, so I won't announce them yet. So opening up more. We just opened up in Citi Fields, the home of the Mets for baseball in New York. We're in the Barclays Center for basketball for the Nets, and obviously we're in the Aria in Las Vegas. So you should see more to come, and yeah, other fun collaborations, and yeah, designing kitchens for this new online home company called Welcome Home, and I have my monthly column in Us Weekly, which I'm sure is a magazine you all subscribe to and read cover to cover. Very high-end brows, reading there. And yeah, so just more of the same. But yeah, I'm mostly busy with Soulbird these days. So just trying to expand that brand and franchise it, and then hopefully sell it. Yeah.
we need 10 Judy to cover this, all the projects.
Thank you.
Okay. So Soo-young, so do you have any plan to open your own restaurant in the future?
Yes, I hope so. Someday, but. Thank you. Where can I? 되게 하고 싶은 일 중에 하나예요. 제가 요리를 좋아한 이후로 8살 때부터 하고 싶었던 일이어서 늘 이렇게 메모하는 게 습관이어서 내가 나중에 식당을 열면 이런 거 해야지 했었는데 그때 꿈은 그런 거였어요. 내가 배우를 19살 때부터 했으니까 배우를 하다가 내가 좀 이제 인기가 떨어지거나 좀 너무 노쇠해서 매력이 어떤 남자 배우로서의 어떤 성적 매력이 좀 줄어들었을 때, 좀 죄송해요. 표현이 좀 격하네요. 죄송합니다. 그랬을 때 이제 내가 조그만 국수 가게나 조그만 빵 가게를 열어서 그 동네 역에서 제일 맛있는 할아버지가 되고 싶었어요. 저 할아버지 내가 되게 맛있는 국수를 팔아. 근데 볼 수가 없어. 왜냐면 전 새벽에 육수를 내놓고 아침에 퇴근할 거거든요. 빵도 새벽에 만들어 놓고 아침에 퇴근하고. 그게 저의 버킷리스트 중에 하나예요. 지금도 그 꿈을 갖고 있어요. 동네 역에서 가장 맛있는 빵을 만드는 국수를 만드는 할아버지가 되는 거. 근데 그거 아니면 지금 생각보다 제가 요리로 유명해지는 바람에 되게 잘해야 될 것 같아요. 프레셔가 있어요. 그래서 한번 하면은 사실은 되게 재미있는 음식을 달아보고 싶긴 해요. 근데 지금은 사실은 레시피를 만드는 게 너무 저한테 중요한 일이고 그거를 집에서 직접 해드시게 만드시는 게 저한테 가장 사명감 있는 일이어서 당분간은 지금 레시피를 만드는 일만 계속할 것 같습니다. 너무 길었죠? 미안해요. 중간에 끊어야 되는데. I'm sorry. Too long.
So this is opening a restaurant, something I really wanted to do. I love cooking, as I said. This is something I've dreamed of ever since I was a little kid, like eight years old. I've been an actor since I was 19, and I've always had at the back of my mind, if a point comes where I'm not as popular, I'm not as vigorous, I'm not as attractive, then maybe I can make this an alternative path I can go down. And one picture I have in my mind is, so just picture a neighborhood. I want to be known as the grandpa who cooks really, really well. So, but they'll never see me, and the reason being, for instance, if I open a noodle house, I'll go there early in the morning, I'll prepare everything and just go home. And if I open a bakery, for instance, same thing, I go in early in the morning, prepare everything, and then go home. So I have that picture in my head. Here's a grandpa who used to be an actor, but he cooks really, really well, and he has the best noodle houses, he has the best bakery in the neighborhood. But the other thing I need to think about is that the expectation is now really, really high. People know that I cook, people know my recipes. So if I do end up opening a restaurant, I do want to try something new, I do want to try something exciting. But I think for now, the most important thing to me and the most important thing that I have to do is to, as I've said earlier, develop recipes that a lot of people can easily try at home. So I think for the time being, for the foreseeable future, that's what I'll be focusing on. That's what's most important to me.
So this is a final question before we open the mic to audience, and this goes to both. What are some Korean food you anticipate to be our next kimbap or tofu soup in the US or UK?
닭발? 뭐가 있을까요? I think it will be 쌈장. Do you know 쌈장? Yes, 고추장 and 된장 mixed together. 쌈장은 전 되게 재미있다고 봐요. 제가 저번 아직 방송은 안 됐는데 지난달 녹화에서 쌈장을 좀 한국에서 밀어보려고 미국에서 인기가 있다라고 거짓말을 했어요. 쌈장 is very famous sauce in the USA. People call it WBS, Wonderful Brown Sauce, you know? 약간 호응이 약하더라고요, 생각보다. 그래서 저는 제 개인적으로 미는 건데 쌈장을 좀 띄우고 싶어요. 되게 이지하고 누구나 쉽게 접근할 수 있고 너무 맵지도 않고 고기를 찍어 먹기 너무 좋아요. 그리고 한 가지에 바이럴할 수 있는 포인트가 있어요. 여기 계시는 일론 머스크 씨가 맛있게 먹었다는 기사가 한 줄 있어요. 그래서 저는 뭐 제가 할 수 있는 안 좋아한데. 그렇게 해서 저는 개인적인 소망이지만 쌈장을 띄워보고 싶은 욕심이 있어요. 뭐가 될지는 잘 모르겠어요.
So the first thing that comes to mind is a sauce called samjang. So I recorded this episode. It hasn't gotten on the air yet, but since I wanted to push this idea of samjang, I lied and I said samjang is really, really popular in the US. Sadly, it doesn't seem to have caught on as much as I had hoped. The reaction is not quite what I had anticipated. But even still, I think it's promising because first, it's approachable. It's not too spicy. It's just awesome to dip your meat into and eat meat. So I think this could be the next big thing. And one thing that I want to mention here is the fact that Elon Musk ate a dish with samjang in it and he really liked it. So people know about it. So I think this samjang can potentially catch on.
I hope. Just I hope.
Judy?
Well, I'm banking on Korean fried chicken, you know, obviously, because I've created an entire concept around Korean fried chicken with my Seoul bird. So I hope that's the next big trend.
Seoul bird.
Seoul bird, yeah. I mean, everybody eats chicken. Everybody loves fried chicken.
Yes.
It's a food that so many cultures enjoyed some type of fried chicken, you know, in a different way. And it's not a meat that is banned by any religion or anything. It's not like pork or beef, or certain religions can't eat it. So chicken is truly enjoyed globally. And when it's fried, it's even better. And also the umami sauces, you know, so when it's covered in a sauce that's based on gochujang or kangjang or, you know, garlic and ginger and all these, you know, deeply fermented umami sauces, it's even better. So, yeah, I hope it's Korean fried chicken.
Great.
Yeah.
So samjang and KFC, Korean fried chicken.
쌈장 치킨.
Yeah.
Samjang chicken.
Will be something. 쌈장 치킨.
Yeah.
So, all right. So we're gonna have open mic from the audience. So for those who want to ask questions to chefs, line up.
Should I continue?
Yep.
I will just introduce myself. My name is Taehyung. Oh, sorry.
Yeah. Closer. Thank you.
My name is Taehyung, second year master's student here, soon graduating. And I'm also recently worked with our omnipotent professor, So Kim. And
Colombia.
And also, yes, like I'm glad to be here with you as your hube of Seas Alliance. So under the theme of today's topic, the Korean Cuisine Gone Global, I would like to ask what your perspectives on those chefs or other individuals delving into the chemistry of those scents, those smelling aromas, along with flavors inherent in diverse ingredients sourced from various countries, not only Korea, but like around the world, and cultures, with the successful innovation of such a new dish, yet branding the menu as their own country's cuisine. For instance, as we just talked about it, phenomenon of Korean fried chicken, which is like definitely not literally from Korea, but being incorporated and identified as part of our own nation's culinary product.
Great. Who wanna answer? Judy?
Okay, fine. So this gets very, I think, tricky, but you know, the world is becoming a very small place these days, and people are pulling inspiration from all over the place. But I think it's fine, just as long as you always acknowledge where it's come from. You know, so I always say that, you know, Korean fried chicken isn't necessarily Korean. It comes from the GIs that came over from America during the war, and it was a Southern dish. And then it evolved. It became uniquely Korean. You know, the batter transformed to a wet batter, which is more closely related to a tempura batter, and you know, and then the sauces, and then boomeranged back around the world to become something that was uniquely Korean and different from Southern fried chicken, different from buttermilk chicken, different from Nashville fried chicken. Korean fried chicken now is even evolved further. So now you're seeing like dry batters. Now you're seeing it with peanuts on top. Now you're seeing it with rosemary on top. I mean, all different types of things. But I think just as long as everybody gives a nod of acknowledgement, saying that this is from whichever cuisine and I'm using it and this is the inspiration, I think it's fine. I don't agree with, I don't know how to phrase it, but necessarily like stealing or, you know, saying that this is mine, you know, because I feel that the credit needs to be there. Yeah.
맞아요. 100년 전으로만 가도 사실은 고유의 음식이라는 건 존재하진 않아요. 김치에 고춧가루가 들어간 지 150년밖에 안 됐어요. 160년 정확하게 널리 먹게 된 지. 이탈리아의 국수를 전해준 건 중국에서 이 아라비아 상인들이 전해준 거고요. 참깨가 우리 되게 많이 먹죠. 한국 사람들은 참깨를 모든 음식에 뿌리죠. 그건 인도에서 나와서 아라비아를 통해서 우리나라에 왔죠. 여기까지 할까요?
So even if you go back just 100 years, the idea of authentic food doesn't really apply. So for instance, it's only been 150, 160 years since we put red pepper flakes in kimchi. It hasn't been that long. And if you think about pasta, if you look at it historically, it was traders going from China to Italy and exporting this idea of noodles, right? And another example, if you look at sesame, for instance, say it started in India, goes around the Arabian Peninsula, and it spread to Korea across the continent. So there's not really this idea of, the idea of authentic isn't as simple as it seems.
제일 중요한 건 김치, 한국 음식에 중요한 고춧가루, 매운 음식, red, hot 이런 건데 그 고추가 어디서 왔냐? 아메리카에서 왔잖아요. 그렇게 따지면 사실은 어떤 게 오리진이냐, 어떤 게 우리 것이냐라는 건 되게 좀 별로 의미 없는 이야기이지 않나라는 생각도 가끔은 들어요. 뭐 이 정도면 설명이 된 것 같은데 제가 한 가지 재미있는 얘기를 들려드리자면 여러분 그 한국 사람들 어묵 아시죠? 오뎅. 오뎅이 일본 음식 같잖아요. 근데 그 기원을 찾아가다 보면 이런 얘기가 있어요. 진시황이라고 되게 무서운 왕이 있었죠. 중국의 네로 같은. 생선 요리가 나왔는데 먹다가 가시가 여기 걸렸네. 만든 사람 데리고 와. 죽였어요. 그 다음에 나온 게 어묵이래요. 다 갈아버렸대요. 왕이 먹다가 가시 안 걸리게. 그런 일화가 있듯이 사실은 뭐 웃자고 하는 얘기지만 음식이란 건 이렇게 서로 전해주고 또 전해받고 그러면서 발전하는 것 같아요. 어떤 게 내 것이야 하고 너무 지키고만 있으면 음식은 발전하지 않고 없어져 버리더라고요. 다른 음식과 섞인 음식만 살아남아요. 분명해요. 그 자리에 멈춘 음식은 그냥 기록에만 남고 없어져 버려요. 그래서 섞이는 과정이 음식의 수명을 연장하는 과정이다. 저는 그렇게 이해합니다.
So going back to kimchi, for instance. So we now put red pepper flakes into kimchi. But pepper came from the Americas, if you think about it. So this discussion, this idea of this is our cuisine, in some sense is really meaningless. So I'll tell you an interesting story about fish cake, udeng. So a lot of people think this is Japanese food. But there's a story where the first emperor of the Qin dynasty, he was eating fish, and apparently like a fish bone got stuck in his throat, and he ordered the person who made it killed. So what they did after that is that they just ground up all the fish, so that wouldn't happen, right? I mean, this is just a funny episode, but the idea is that food, historically, it's been, you share it with people, you receive it from other people, and I think that only food that goes through this process of exchange, that food has longevity. I think if you don't go through that mixing process of giving and taking, you'll just see a recipe in a book, and people won't be eating it.
Thank you. 감사합니다.
Can we have a gentleman over there?
Yeah. All right. First of all, thank you so much for an amazing talk. My name is Andrew. I'm a Stanford alum, a Master's of 7, but more relevant to this event, I'm just a big food enthusiast. So I love cooking at home. I subscribe to 편스토랑. I was at Jinju in 2018, so I had the honor to dine at the restaurant. So that was amazing. So my question is, it's great to see all the like Korean cuisine going global across all the spectrum, like from street tacos, like by Kogi, by Roy Choi, to as Judy mentioned, like there are like 8 Michelin-star restaurants in New York doing high-end, fine dining Korean-inspired food. At the same time, like these traditional like Korean alcoholic beverages, which I think are extension of Korean cuisine, are not really being seen or like being adopted outside of like just ordering like soju at the Korean restaurants, right? There's much more than that, right? So there's the traditional distilled, like 중류식 soju and like makgeolli, which is like really like nicely made, but those like are not really being talked about or like being like consumed in the at a global scale, right? So I love to kind of understand like your thoughts on how we might be able to elevate the traditional like Korean alcoholic beverages as how we've done for Korean food. Yeah.
Let's start with the Soo-young.
되게 luckily 제가 오기 직전에 그 한국식 막걸리 증류를 하시는 가장 유명한 분 중에 하나인 박록담 선생님을 만나고 왔거든요. 스탠포드에도 한번 오셨던 분인데 그분한테 들었는데 미국으로 수출을 하려면 그 필요한 벌크가 굉장히 크더라고요. 근데 한국 증류수는 아시다시피 아직은 기업화되진 않았고 국가에서 좀 막고 있는 것도 있어요. 왜냐하면 이걸 대기업이 가져가는 순간 가양주들이 다 없어지거든요. 작은 동네 맛있는 술들이 없어지니까 국가에서 통제를 하고 있긴 한데 그거에 반면에 근데 그런 이유 때문에 그 맛있는 술들이 미국까지 건너오지 못하고 있긴 해요. 훨씬 더 많이 만들어야 미국으로 보내서 유통을 시킬 수 있더라고요. 그러니까 여기 디스트리뷰터가 원하는 물량이 생각보다 많아요. 너무 현실적인 얘기인가요? 너무 정없다. 그렇죠. 근데 그런 이유가 제가 들은 거라서 바로 한번 대답을 해봤습니다.
So there's, I think, may not be what you're looking for, but there's a really like logistical regulation related reason for this. And it so happens that just before I came to the US for this event, I met Mr. Baknokdam, who is one of the most famous makgeolli makers in South Korea. And what he told me was that he had looked into exporting to the United States, and it turns out if you want to export to the United States, you need really large bulk amounts. You need to make bulk amounts so that then it's possible to distribute it across the United States. But the situation in Korea is such that the government, to some extent, is blocking large companies from taking this over, because then what will happen is that all of these smaller local distilleries will die out. So it's just not possible to make the large amount that you need to export. And that's, again, it could seem too much like nuts and bolts, but I think I've heard that was a problem from this famous makgeolli maker, so I just thought I'd share that with you.
그리고 한 가지가 더 있는데 되게 안타까운 게 한국 사람들은 이제 요리하고 술 담그는 사람들은 다 아는데 한국 주류 세법이 잘못돼 있어요. 그래서 수입한 양주보다 가양주 세금이 더 비싸요. 뭔가 묘한 그 도수에 대한 이상한 세금 문제가 있어가지고 그게 고쳐지면은 아마 좀 가격적인 문제도 정리가 되고 하면 뭐 대량이 아니어도 미국에 판매할 수 있지 않을까? 뭐 여러 가지 생각을 해봅니다. 안 그래도 그게 되게 화두예요, 한국에서도.
So the unfortunate thing is, again, this is along the similar lines, is that the tax code relating to alcohol in Korea, there's a little bit of a problem with this, to the point where the tax rate on imported liquor is lower than domestically produced liquor. So I think like this issue needs to be sorted out. And once the prices make more sense, once the prices are more sensible, then we still might not be able to sell it in bulk to the United States, but we may be able to sell it in smaller amounts. This is actually a big topic of conversation among people in this industry.
There are actually a lot of Korean Americans making Korean sul in America, actually, small batch and everything. And they're getting traction, but I think it's all about branding and marketing. You know, at the end of the day, it's marketing that's going to make these, you know, like maku or these, you know, makgeolli brands, or like there's tons of soju being made in Brooklyn and everything. That's going to get it to where it needs to be. There's also a question of distribution in the United States, and I had this problem also in the UK, or even in my place in Vegas, because in Las Vegas I wanted to sell some soju. But the big alcohol distributors do not sell soju, you know, the Diageos of the world or whatever. And so you have to buy soju from a Korean, you know, H-Mart, a Korean grocery store, basically, in order to get it. So it's a bit of a chicken and egg. You know, if there's no demand, then a regular big distributor that carries, you know, it's like the Tito's vodka and all of the big brands, like they don't carry a Korean brand, especially a small batch brand, because there's no demand for it. So until there's demand, a large distributor is not going to carry it. Until a large distributor doesn't carry it, you're not going to see it on the shelves at a regular grocery store, at a regular liquor store. You have to go to a Korean-specific place in order to buy it. And even a Korean restaurant like mine, I can't even get it, because MGM was like, well, then we have to set up a new supplier with these people and whatever. And so it's difficult. So I think it's a marketing exercise. It's creating awareness, and it's creating the demand. But the Korean Americans are making big waves in the small batch production. They're getting bigger and really making beautiful products. Yeah, so it's getting there.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
Hi, thank you for coming out today and talking to us on this panel. I'm Tyler. I'm a third-year undergrad in Math and East Asian Studies with a focus on Korea. A common question that consistently comes up, like in my degree, is what does it mean for something to be Korean? So this leads me to my question today. How do you think Korean food is changing, both in South Korea as well as abroad, and what keeps these foods Korean?
I mean, I can start. So, operating both in the United States and in the UK, so Europe and United States, I'm seeing, and also I had a restaurant at one point in Asia and Hong Kong. And what I could do in these different continents was extremely different based on the demographics of the clientele. So obviously I'm trying to serve Korean food, but I'm not trying to shove food down people's throats. If it doesn't sell, I'm going to take it off the menu. You know what I mean? I want to have the DNA of my food to be Korean. So if Koreans come in and they taste it, they're like, wow, it's Korean. But like when my parents would come to Jinju, they're like, where's the Korean food? You know what I mean? So like, it was very difficult in London to actually do that all the time. And my best sellers were, the Korean bulgogi, kimchi burger, the Korean fried chicken, so it was a very fusion type thing. But I like to think that the DNA was Korean. The samjang tasted like samjang, the bibimbap was bibimbap, etc. But it's hard, and the more, depending on where you open, it really makes a difference. So in Las Vegas, you think it's very international. It's actually not. It's a lot of middle America going in there. We just took kimchi off the menu because nobody was ordering it, and we had it on one of our kimchi sandwich, our chicken sandwiches. Everybody was getting it without it. Like take the kimchi off. I don't want kimchi. Everything. Like what is kimchi? And so we just took it off. We're like, okay, we'll have it on the side if people want to order it on the side, and nobody was ordering it on the side or asking for an add-on. So you know what? I'm like, fine. I'm not going to shove kimchi down people's throats. And then it's also a cost issue. You know what I mean? If it's all going into the trash and it's all being wasted, I'm not going to do that because that affects my gross profit, etc. So you have to test things out in the markets that you go into. It's not always successful, whereas in Hong Kong, I could serve the spiciest, most authentic, quote unquote, like budae-jjigae, haemultang, or like whatever it was, and it sold, whereas I tried to put budae-jjigae on the menu in London, and nobody ordered it. They're like, what is this? And people would send it back. They're like, what is this? So it's difficult. It really is. And I saw things change. Like when I was working at other restaurants when I was in London, we had Korean fried chicken on the menu, and nobody ordered it. I changed it to spicy fried chicken. Everybody ordered it. So this was before the Korean wave happened, So people don't order things that they don't know, So it's an exercise in menu writing also. But it's changing. I've seen this change, and even in the 19 years that I've been in London, now there's so many new Korean restaurants. People know what kimchi is. People are embracing it. You can buy gochujang in the Sainsbury's or the Waitrose and like normal grocery stores. So I'm seeing it change a lot just in a couple of decades. But so for my restaurants, I like to think that the DNA and it tastes very Korean, and Koreans, if they come there, like they have that familiarity with it. But at the same time, it's accessible enough for somebody who has never tried Korean food for them to like it. And there are a lot of people also who just don't want to eat anything spicy. Like you would be surprised. So if it's red or if it's spicy, they're like, no, I can't handle it. Like cannot handle anything spicy. And so, this is also a struggle as well. In some of my locations, you have to have a non-spicy version, of something. So it's different depending on where you open, and you have to know your customer. Otherwise, you're just going to go out of business. Yeah.
한국 음식을 정의하는 건 저도 좀 어려워요. 저는 평생 한국에 살았기 때문에 뭐 잘은 막 직접적으로 느낀 적은 없지만 좀 다른 얘기를 해보자면 저는 한국 음식임을 유지하는 건 물론 소스라고 생각을 해요. 그게 유일하게 한국의 아이덴티티를 받쳐주는 어떤 기둥 같은 게 장문화, 소스 문화라고 생각을 하는데 그 이면에는 그런 거 있는 것 같아요. 사실 한국 음식은 조금만 더 내려가도 훨씬 블렌드한, 그냥 블렌드 테이스트가 중요하거든요. 밍밍한 맛. 한국 음식은 지금처럼 완전 간이 되어 있어서 먹자마자 이렇게 be prepared 되어 있는 게 아니고 became 되는 음식이거든요. 먹는 사람이 그 밍밍한 음식을 간을 하고 양념장을 더해서 완성하는 게 한국의 문화인데 유일하게 비빔밥만 남아있죠. 근데 지금 한국 음식을 해외에서 정의하는 건 맵다, 달다 이런 느낌이 있어요. 그래서 저는 사실 물어보고 싶어요. 외국 분들이 느끼기에 한국 음식이란 어떤 겁니까? 굉장히 물어보고 싶어요. 저는 오히려 냉면 같은 음식, 나물 같은 음식, 좀 밍밍하고 내가 그걸 초장이나 장을 찍어서 먹든지 고추장과 더해서 먹는 내가 완성시키는 그런 음식이 한식이라고 생각을 했는데 그래서 저는 반대로 묻고 싶습니다. 한국 음식이 어떤 음식이에요? In your mind.
Okay.
It's okay.
So this is a difficult question for me. I grew up in Korea. I've lived in Korea all my life, so it's a tricky question. I think in one sense, the sauces that go in Korean cooking are really pillars of Korean cuisine, the various types of jang, for instance. But in another sense, I really think when people think of Korean food, they think it has strong seasoning, it's spicy, it's like that. But it wasn't always this way. So when I think of Korean food in one instance, it comes out bland, and people complete the dish in a way that is right for themselves by adding these various types of sauces, right? So when I'm in Korea, the impression I get of what outsiders think of Korean food is that it's spicy, that it's sweet, or like the way that I think of it is people add these types of sauces in a way that they like. So I actually want to ask people outside of Korea, what do you think is Korean food? I think it's a difficult question, but I'm curious to hear what people have to say.
What is the first taste when you think about Korean food?
Barbecue.
Barbecue,
People
barbecue.
normally think about Korean
How about you?
barbecue.
Yeah.
I think you're right that the foreigners, people outside of Korea do have this impression, at least I have this impression, that Korean food generally is spicy, but also holds this like sweet undertone, but also is like well seasoned and has enough like salt and balances all of these parts of food very well. It's hard to say any one thing because Korean food is also very like diverse. So it's hard to place it on any like there's no blanket statement that you can put to it. But I think with what food has been exported outside of Korea, you can see that a lot of it tends to be like spicy and sweet, and also like non-spicy versions for. But I can see why we think that Korean food is spicy and sweet.
Thank you. So the last question, Summer, you've been standing for 20 minutes, so I saw that. So I'll take
all day.
if it can be a very brief.
Okay, I'll try. So this is an extension of So's. Oh, I'm Summer, by the way. I'm a postdoc researcher in the Stanford Food Design Lab. And this question is an extension of So's very last question, what's the next kimbap? And so our lab, we have worked with CJ, the Korean food conglomerate, and our project, we were looking at what does Korean food mean to Americans. And as we worked on this project, I realized that CJ, it actually has 6 food items that they want to focus on globalizing. So I'm gonna list them up, and I would like to ask you which one you think is most promising, and how should we market it in the U.S. So the 6 items, they are instant rice, kimchi, mandu, fried chicken, kim, like seaweed, and lastly gochujang. So which one do you think will it can take off in the U.S. and what are your thoughts on marketing it?
Bing, bing, bing. I think it will be Kim.
Kim?
And I hope because 한국 사람들이 세계에서 뭘 제일 많이 먹는 줄 알아요?
Kim.
So what do of all food items, what do Korean people eat most?
Best one is
Do you know what Korean people eat most?
수산물을 제일 많이 먹어요, 세상에서.
So the Korean people actually eat the most seafood in the world.
Because of the 김. 그래서 김이 되게 중요한데 한국은 감태도 먹잖아요. 감태 잘 안 먹어요. 한국은 바다에 나 있는 풀을 다 뜯어 먹어요. 모자반, 몽, 톳, 뭐 청각, 감태, 김, 뭐 파래. 지금 저만 해도 6가지 이상 알고 있어요. 한국 사람은 다 뜯어 먹어요. Everything. In the mountain or in the sea, we ate every grass, kind of grass. We ate everything. 근데 그래서인지 왜 난 영어하다 한국말 하다 그러는 거예요? I'm sorry. 그러다 보니까 한국 사람이 이렇게 잘하는 거란 말이에요. 제가 개발한 음식 중에 작년에 감태 우동이 있어요. 제가 만든 건데 반응이 굉장히 좋아요. 감태가 비싸서 망했어요. 근데 그런 것처럼 김을 사실 일본에 노리도 있지만 노리보다 이제 김이 훨씬 유명해졌어요. 그럼 저는 김과 감태 그리고 모자반 톳 굉장히 건강하거든요. 미역. 누구는 미역국을 약간 스컹크 냄새라고 하는 사람도 있긴 한데 저는 그건 잘 모르겠고 미역이나 김 이런 씨위드, 코리안 씨위드가 좀 다음에 그런 지위를 가져갈 수 있지 않을까. 왜냐하면 김밥 덕분에 사람들이 김을 우리 거로 알기 시작했거든요. 그 스텝 다음에 한국의 씨위드를 좀 많이 홍보해서 다음 스텝을 가져가면 어떨까 하는 야망이 있어요.
I love it.
미안해요. 미안.
So the reason, part of the reason why Korean people eat the most seafood is there's all of these types of quote unquote vegetables and seaweed in the ocean, and Korean people just take out all of it and find ways to eat it. And it's also very, very healthy. I mean, things like kelp. I'll be honest, I don't know the names for the other weeds you mentioned, but just like things Korean people, whether like it grows in the mountains or grows in the sea, they find a way to eat it, right? Last year, I developed a menu using one of these ingredients, made a udon out of it. It failed because the ingredient was too expensive, right? But again, like if you think about it, in Japan you have nori, right? But kim, like Korean dried seaweed, I mean, this has become much more famous now. And now that people know kimbap, and people know that kimbap is Korean, then I think the next step is people will know kim as a Korean food. And I think this can really become a big thing going forward.
So I think people know kim, but they don't know it's kim. I actually got in an argument with somebody recently because she was talking about these great snacks that she found at Trader Joe's, and she's been eating them. And they're these roasted seaweed snacks. I'm like, yeah, it's Korean, it's kim. She's like, no, it's Trader Joe's. And I was like, it's Korean. And so everybody is selling kim in the little packs now everywhere. You know, but nobody knows it's Korean, so that kind of bothers me. So I got into this argument. I was like, no, it's actually a Korean snack, and like da-da-da. And she was like, no, and then she had no idea that the history and the roots of it came from Korea. So I think kim is already out there as a snack. You know, you're seeing it even in the UK, like fast food chains are selling it as part of, and you know, Japanese ones are selling it as part of their offering also. But I also think you mentioned mandu, so dumplings. I think everybody knows what a dumpling is. Every culture has their own form of a dumpling. You know, some type of meat encased in some kind of dough. You know, in the UK, it could be a pasty or a meat pie, obviously ravioli or a pierogi or you know, there are tons of forms of dumplings from all over the world. So it's something that is so accessible already. People are familiar with it, and I think it's a very easy lift to try to market that. You know, and you can put all types of different fillings and even make sweet ones. You know, it's an empanada. It's a, you know, it's you know, lots of different cultures can relate to it. So I think that's something that would be very easy to do. You make sweet ones, you make savory ones, and yeah, boil them, steam them, fry them, deep fry them is all different ways to cook as well.
Okay. Thank you so much for your active participation. And I'd like to thank the amazing co-organizers, Professor Shin and Daphne Joo. Let's enjoy cooking and eating, and let's give them big hands.
Okay, thank you so much for great talk and discussions. And I feel a little more desire, also pressure to cook more. But once again, thank you, both chef and also our speakers and our team and our sponsors. And as I mentioned earlier, we want to continue our K series. So if you have any suggestions for next year, please let me know or let us know. And then as a small token of appreciation, we have a small gift for both chefs. So. Last year we hosted President Yoon Suk-yeol and Kishida, Prime Minister of Japan. Now we gave them only one small cap. I think we said more than 10 years. Okay, so this concludes our program today. And once again, thank you for coming, and hopefully see you again. Thank you so much. 감사합니다. Okay, picture. Okay.
Thank you for coming. At this time, please exit the auditorium. If you are one of our speakers today or a staff member, please stay behind.